Hello, hey, what's up? We are live and we are back. This is the movie discussion pocket dimension where time does not exist and the only thing that matters is film. I'm Cole and that is Jay, and we're back after had a few hiccups and missing a couple weeks, which is too bad. Wasn't what either of us wanted because I think we were both feeling pretty enthusiastic coming into the new year, and then as usual, some stuff came up, whatever. But now we can hit the ground running, and we. In deliberating what to do next, there were a few different avenues and paths we could go on. But kind of in light of the fact that we had some false starts and we would like to implement them, I think it was part of the reason why we chose tonight's subject was something, that we'd really feel enthusiastic about and something that we both kind of know a lot about even before going into it, just so that it gives us a bit of a rhythm, perhaps, before we do more ambitious stuff going forward and maybe tackling, complicated stuff / stuff that we aren't as familiar with, because on the show we also like to do movies that we didn't know about beforehand. But this is one that both of us have known a long time, and this is Katsuhiro Otomo's cyberpunk masterpiece Akira, based on, of course, the novel of the same name by him. But yes, he actually was the writer and director of the film too, which is probably one of the reasons why it was such a successful adaptation. This came out in 1988. The manga began in 1982 and was actually hadn't finished yet. The manga was still ongoing when the film came out, so they had to kind of do some spoilers. Although not exactly, because the two versions have vastly different endings. And of course, this being a standard sort of 2-hour movie, they had to cut down lots of plot because this was a manga that has been collected into six large volumes, clocking in at over 2,000 pages. So quite a bit of stuff had to be condensed or just completely gotten rid of, which is the type of thing that always pisses me off. But of course, I understand the limitations. And to me, when you'll often hear me bitching about all sorts of adaptations of movies, comics, graphic novels, and novels and stuff. Like, to me, this is one of the very best. So this is right up there with something like Jurassic Park for me, or maybe The Crow, where I'm just super thrilled with how even though they had to make changes, I'm really happy with how they did it and stuff. So this being a movie that's like as high up as it can get for somebody like me. For me, like, movies don't really get any better than Akira, so it's a bit of a trap for me because I don't want to just gush for forever and say how great everything is and stuff, because we're still trying to do a somewhat of a critical analysis here, and so there's a lot of stuff to get to, and I don't want to go too far down any one path and derail the show, getting caught up in things that don't really matter. So we're gonna try my best to put some organization and structure into this. So as much as I've already babbled without even saying anything, I'm going to defer to Jay here and just sort of say, Jay, I know this is a movie we kind of actually both saw it quite a while ago, almost 20 years ago for the both of us. We were both a little ahead of the curve on this, and that I think we saw it before a lot of other North American audiences. So can you just sort of talk about the circumstances of your first seeing it, what you knew about it, if you knew anything about it going on, and sort of what you thought about it and how it affected you, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, I mean, with the exception of probably some, like episodic cartoons, like it's my introduction to, real like adult style,
Sure,
and adult anime, and I saw it in like 97, 98, something like that, and
yeah, me too, something like that.
Kind of just on a surprise, someone brought it over and we watched it, and I was just blown away. Because I think I was reading it was like $9 million budget, something like that.
Yeah, it had a really high budget. It was at the time it was the biggest budget of an anime film.
Right.
It really shows.
It's all on the screen too. Yeah, it absolutely shows. It completely blew me away. Start to finish.
Yeah, I think it's even 10 years, like it came out in 88, and I think it was maybe released in North America in various ways. I don't know how, maybe a year or so later, although I don't really know most of the circumstances on it. I think the VHS I saw in the late 90s came out or had a release of 92 or something like that, although the original English dub had been done in 89, and we'll talk about the dub and stuff like that. But like you said, it was a big step forward, sort of a big step out of the animation age ghetto, which people have heard me talk about, which is something that still exists even in 2019. You know, the perception that a lot of North American audiences have toward animated stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Some of it is not their fault because it's kind of what we grew up on. You know, because of especially the massive success of Disney. Like Disney was at the top of the heap when it came to animation. There's plenty of animation below that, but Disney was at the top, and Disney went forward with the kid-friendly,
exactly,
family-oriented stuff. So that was what a lot of us grew up and knew with. So the idea of seeing animation that dealt with, you know, adult things was very different to us and unheard of and stuff. And to this day, there's plenty of people that, although it seems kind of incredible now because of the way what a footprint anime has made over here in the West, but still, I kind of went off track there. But what I mean is, yeah, so this movie was a landmark event in many ways. That's one of them. The other was simply, even aside from the adult stuff, just anime in general being, you know, not just seen over here for what it was, because we both grew up seeing sort of animes that were sort of disguised. Like we didn't really think of them as anime at the time. You know, there's a few that as I've said, to my great disappointment, I never got to see Robotech. It never aired on any Canadian channel or anything that I got. But that was a big one. And I'd seen Voltron, and I'd seen the 80s version of Astro Boy. So, you know, Saber Riders was a short-lived one that I loved. So I was familiar with anime, but I'd never really had a word for it or said anything about it. And again, these were pretty high-quality stuff, but still not on the level as something like Akira. So for us, we also were used to, maybe we'll talk about this a little too, was how animation kind of, I can't remember the name of the age, but basically from like the 60s through the 80s was, with the exception of some of the big studio stuff by, say, Disney, and that's really almost the glaring exception, animation was, you know, considered a lower medium, at least in the West, and not a lot of time and money and effort was thrown into it. And this is where you get like the low stuff, like, and I'm not saying it's all terrible. I'm just saying it had that kind of approach, like Hanna-Barbera and stuff like that. You know, limited animation, not great production values. And if you know, it's a kid's thing, it's kind of disposable. It doesn't matter and stuff. And that continued right through the 80s, and there was sort of a shift here. Akira was part of that shift. You know, Disney helped do it on its own too, and we've talked about this. People have heard me blab ad nauseum about this, but it is true that like by the end of the 70s, there were certain animators, most notably, of course, Don Bluth, who were disillusioned with the direction Disney had gone on, and he broke away and he formed his own studio, and by making his own movies of a very high quality, he kind of helped Disney whip themselves into shape, because for the first time ever they had serious competition. So this led into the later half of the 80s, what's commonly known as the Disney Renaissance. But it wasn't just the Disney Renaissance. In many ways, it was the animation Renaissance as far as the West goes. And Akira was part of that. The other part would be, the stuff Disney did. DuckTales came out in '87. And that was really the first big, like, Western animation show, you know, still for kids, that had, you know, high production values, a lot of time and a lot of money and a lot of effort was put into that. And slowly other shows would start to follow suit, but Disney was always on top of that. And of course, Akira came smack around that too. '88 was the same year that Disney had done Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which not only shone the light on the idea of putting a lot of serious effort into animation, it also showed us that that's how it started, because one of the focuses was the golden age of animation, the 30s and 40s, when actually, there was all sorts of short stuff, stuff like that Flip the Frog and some of the stuff like Betty Boop. Yeah, they were all, but at the same time, there was actually some seriously quality animation going on. Fleischer Studios being amongst the foremost, being at the forefront of that. For instance, like if you say, you can probably find it on YouTube, like look up, say, the Fleischer cartoons of the Superman cartoon that they did in the 40s. That animation is amazing. It is really good. And if you want to see a good contrast, compare it to the animation of, say, 25 years later when they're doing, say, the Super Friends show in the 60s. Yeah. And it's ridiculous to think that the much older animation, it's such higher quality. The movements are fluid, the colors pop. And this is the 40s, and then you get stuff made in the 60s, and it's herky-jerky, and it's full of reused backgrounds and poor renderings and, bad colors,
They were just churning that crap out, man. Just
exactly
getting it out of there.
So yeah, the golden age of animation really was that, and you see some of that going back to the very first Disney studio movies, you know. And what's funny is people always think of Disney as this behemoth, and they are, but it took them a long time to get there. Even when they were churning out good movies in the 30s, 40s had a bit of a hiccup because of World War II and so many of their key animators and people having to leave. That's why in the 40s Disney stopped for a couple of years. They didn't have like full feature lengths. They had what are like those package movies where they put a few things together, like Three Caballeros and what is it? The one that had the Legend of Sleepy Hollow book ended in with The Wind in the Willows. So a few things like that. You know, they weren't full feature length films anywhere, and that's because of World War II. But even when they were say like, oh yeah, they started out in such a great foot. They won like an Oscar for the very first one, Snow White. You know, they're churning out high quality stuff and it's doing well, but they were also like not making that much money. The studio was like nearly bankrupt by like the beginning of the 50s. It took a few other hits to really turn things around for them. Cinderella in 1950, Alice in Wonderland in 51, and finally through as the 50s got, that's when Disney finally started to actually start to make some money, become the power we know them of. But it took them a long time, and they really had to take risks and gambles. Say what you want about Walt Disney, there's not enough time to get into it, but the man took some big risks. He really believed in what he was doing, and obviously he believed in the people he's working with, because he took some really huge risks. Like he could have fallen flat on his face and like been completely broke, and not just broke himself, but also have like affected all these people working under him. You know, sent them into the unemployment line and stuff. So, but anyway, the callback to that was Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which kind of referenced the golden age and how much and the time of effort. So I think the late 80s was sort of a reawakening, renaissance, etc., about how like just what great results you can produce in animation, because it's a wonderful medium if you give it the proper respect and attention. The Japanese, of course, were ahead of us. They were already sort of doing that sort of thing. But Akira coming over here, and Akira, it's almost like that's not why they did it, but it almost feels that way, because like if you were comparing, say, animated television shows from the 70s and 80s from Japan to over here, the Japanese ones are far superior, to the point that even some of them are being brought over here and dubbed and changed and stuff for audiences. But it's almost like they're like, all right, let's do a movie and let's put a ton of effort into it, and we'll give it a North American release too. And Akira did that, and the dominoes fall. So yeah, just a huge sort of, it's kind of a what is a $10 word or kind of pretentious term to use, but I will say that Akira was part of a paradigm shift in the world of animation. It seriously was.
Well, yeah, I can remember, the VHS time still, just a wave of anime coming in.
Yeah.
U.S. releases, and we're not talking about bootleg stuff here. This is like legit releases. They were like super expensive. I couldn't afford them, but
yeah,
I definitely remember there was a huge section in a Suncoast Video. You probably heard the name before.
Yeah.
And man, it was tons of those things. Lots of stuff, and it's all I attribute a lot of that success to Akira, because
absolutely, I think
a lot of people really got turned on to to anime in general from this film, because it is so good.
Yeah, and one of the things I think that gets a little, well, there's probably other people who have talked about it. I'm going to pretend I'm the only person with the insight to notice this. But if you do notice, if you take a look at some of the animes, like say from the 80s, that got brought over here, one of the main things they would do when they bring it over here is if there were like things that like were very Japanese or had Japanese culture, they would change them or just cut them out completely, because they seem to really worry about North American audiences. Akira seemed to be part of the thing where they were like, hey, we don't always have to downplay the Japanese culture. Maybe we can keep that in. And that's when you finally had shows come over where they weren't hiding it anymore. When you had like Sailor Moon and Dragon Ball and stuff, which have all sorts of Japanese pop culture stuff and things that North American audiences wouldn't necessarily get. Now, they did change it a little, but they didn't the way they used to. They used to just completely hammer that stuff out, or they just pass up a show saying that's just too Japanese, that's too foreign and weird and stuff. And that seemed to open the floodgates for the boom, because they realized at some point, the American distributors or whoever realized at some point, hey, that's part of the appeal. That's what that's what some people like about this. They like that it's they like the Japanese culture. They like that it's something different. And, I was about 13, 14 when this was going on. I was just a sponge for it, and it helped shape, the otaku nerd that I am today. And yeah, Akira, again, just like a massive, massive part of that. Like, there were a few moments for me. Akira's not the first one. The first one was probably Ninja Scroll, which I think I've talked about before. Was so I don't know how old Cartoon Network is in the US, but it had probably been around for a few years before we got the Canadian version, Teletoon. When Teletoon first came out, either at the end of 97 or the end of 98, anyway, it was close to Christmas. It was near the end of the year. Teletoon was interesting because it didn't really seem to have any sort of set programming. Like, it just seemed to just throw whatever at the wall. And it kind of sucks now because, I mean, I've been watching Teletoon for many years, mostly just so I can watch reruns of things like, I don't know, American Dad or whatever. And finally, I've been able to watch Rick and Morty. But in those early years, now they do show animated movies again. But for many years they didn't. But now, like that, for instance, that's why I've seen a lot of like the DC animated movies. Like, unless they get like a Netflix release, or they'll have like a Friday or Saturday night where they'll show like some of those. But anyway, way back at the beginning, yeah, they just, it seemed like they had like holes to fill the programming, so they threw some like full feature length anime movies in there, and that's how I saw Ninja Scroll, which might be like the first sort of like you said, like Akira was sort of like your first one showing like a more adult. For me, it was Ninja Scroll. And I remember Ryan was sleeping over my house. It was over the Christmas holidays, and we were up late. We flipping it on, and suddenly there was this. We didn't get it at the very beginning, but it's close to the beginning. All of a sudden, there's this scene of these ninjas all jumping through the forest from tree branch to tree branch, jumping through a forest. And all of a sudden, like, this big blade comes flying through and decapitates it, rips a whole bunch of them apart, and they all fall down, and blood rains down. And suddenly, like, there's this weird rock guy with a blade, and he's hunting them down. And we're like, what the shit is this? And he's attacking them, and he like starts to rape the girl and everything. And we're like, oh my god! And like, and then we obviously watched the rest of the movie. So
was it uncut completely?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, all that uncut was right there. So I mean, that was always my big wow moment for anime, was just like stumbling across. Like I was aware of what anime was by this point. Right. I'd seen a little bit, but this was sort of the wham moment where I was like, holy shit, that movie just floored me to just stumble upon that and see it. I mean, I love it. It's not as good a movie as Akira, although I still have a lot of fondness for the movie. It is a great, great movie. But that movie is more just sort of almost about a point of like pushing those sorts of boundaries and being like, look at the sex and violence. Let's ramp it up here.
That's right on my level.
Yeah.
When I was 13 and still.
Yeah.
But yeah, I remember like Cartoon Network had, I mean, it was like a few nights a week. They would have like a 2 or 3 hour block of just, it was like Dragon Ball and Cowboy Bebop, and Sailor Moon was probably in there. It was huge.
Yeah. For us, that stuff was deferred to YTV. That's where the Dragon Ball and Sailor Moon were. They were on YTV. And YTV would sporadically show, like in the early 2000s, like various animes of various popularity. Some would just come and go and disappear and stuff like that. I remember in the mid 2000s, one called Bleach was on a lot. I know Ryan was. Yeah, Bleach. I never got into it, although I'd like to and stuff. But it was weird. But yeah, Teletoon seemed to, at least up here, drop the anime. Like, you never see it anymore.
Really?
But that's how it started. Like, it didn't even seem to have, and it showed a few full-length movies. The other one that I recall, kind of not a really great movie, kind of like a very average movie, but I just remember because it was from around the same time, was a movie called Pat Labor, which was sort of a sci-fi movie about like a mechanized police force in a city. It's nothing amazing or anything, it's not on the level of the others, but it was, again, it came out around the same time, and I watched it because it was different, because it was anime, and it was cool. But yeah, same for me, Akira. I remember I'd seen it with a friend, had gotten a hold of a VHS copy, and we watched that, and even that, just the quality is just astounding. Like,
it is.
This is before, like, in the 90s when they started, using some computerization even into the 2D stuff, that you would see in the big Disney movies, like Beauty and the Beast and Aladdin. They'd have those great sort of 3D moments and stuff. Even this is before that. So this is like some of the best like animation you'll ever. I mean, to me, it stacks up to anything that comes out today.
It it's no comparison between the CGI and the hand drawn animation, man.
Yeah.
It's
I know. That's what I'm the biggest champion of. I love hand-drawn animation. It's one of my favorite things in the world, and I think it's really sad that something like Disney has more or less altogether abandoned it. Yeah, I like the new movies that are coming out, like the Pixar and stuff does. They look good and stuff, but I mean, it doesn't mean you just completely abandon 2D. And yeah, just the amount of work and craftsmanship that's put into this. This is, of course, what is known as cell animation, which goes back to the very first ones. It's the same thing that Disney used to do back in the 30s and 40s. Cell animation would be where you would have like clear plates or whatever, like a clear thing, and then you put your drawings on that, and you would layer them. The background would be in the back, and then you'd move it up, and then you have the characters on the top one, and that's what cell animation is. And it's a very painstaking process. It takes a lot of work. And in Akira, it is just astounding because the detail is there in every single frame. You can watch this movie and not even pay attention to what's going on if you want, and just look visually at it and just be amazed by everything that you see without even trying to follow the plot. Of course, it is a very good plot, which we'll get into too. But just the quality visually, it's just amazing. I mean, that movie is over 30 years old now, and it still looks so rich and so detailed and so good. And there's plenty of stuff that has come out in years since that doesn't look half as good.
30 years old and set in 2019. And
yeah.
I got to tell you, man, the future sucks.
It hasn't lived up to expectations at all.
No, the future sucks.
Yeah, so speaking of that year 2019, so of course they move things ahead a little more because of the anime. So in the manga, I think it's a few years earlier because basically what happens is when this opens, the movie came out in 1988. So they say the first cataclysm of Akira's explosion happened in 88, and then they say it's 2019, 31 years later. They do the same thing with the manga. So since the manga came out in 82, they say that was the year that Akira had the first explosion. So I think it's 31 years past 82 in that one. So it's a bit earlier 2000s.
Does the manga go into more detail about World War III? Because I know it just kind of gets brushed over in the film.
It does, but not like a ton. Because again, it's just more or less, like
it happened.
That Akira was like a secret that most people didn't know about. So that when it happened, it led to World War III because people didn't know, the cause of it and stuff. And they never give that much detail, except again the idea that in the years since, Japan has recovered, but has very much been limping along, and that's what we get in both versions. In this, we get Neo Tokyo, which has like the old city, which is still a lot really messed up, and then the newer city, and you have a city that is functioning and has recovered, but not fully at all. It's there's a lot of social unrest, there's a lot of unemployment and crime. The government is fairly splintered and ineffectual because there's a lot of infighting going on and people with their own agendas. And they do touch on it in here, but it's a little more pronounced than the other. Is like they actually have somehow won the bid for the 2020 games, and they're trying to get everything ready for the Olympics, even though their infrastructure's all fucked up, and basically they're in no way prepared for the Olympics. But I guess the idea is they bluff the world into making it seem like they are. So they're all scrambling, trying to like put on this show so they can show like that that Tokyo is back on its feet again, and it's very much not. Like it's a goddamn mess.
I don't think they're gonna pull it off, right?
Yeah. In this, since there's a lot more, probably one of the major differences in this is like this. There's a lot more political stuff going on here that they can only very much touch on in this. But if I wanted to like very quickly say like how they changed it, what I would say is what they did was they took the first volume, and then they took the ending of the end volume, although they made different, and slapped it onto the first volume. So you're thinking, wow, so we miss out on all that? Because like, spoilers, people, what happens at the end of this first volume in the manga is, yes, Tetsuo does initiate a cataclysm, but nothing like on par with what Akira did. He just unleashes sort of a cataclysm that, rocks a lot of the city, certainly kills people, and there's tidal waves, and parts of the city get completely destroyed and stuff. But the whole point is the next five volumes after that pick up in what the city is like after that. So now there is no, like, what we see in this there is still, even though the government's pretty messed up, the government is still there. By the time you're into the second volume of Akira, there is no government now. You're living in a post Tetsuo world where it's just, a lawless sort of dystopia broken into factions based on some of these people with the powers. So that's another thing that's cut out of here is in this you'll see even it's weird too, because at least in the newer dub, the 2001 Pioneer dub, they seem to have the character have a man's voice. But remember, like that person that looks like an old woman in like a kimono, and they're carrying her around on like a dais, and she has the big hair. Like they just like offer, she like falls off the bridge, but she's actually an important character in the manga because she's another person that was in the program years ago, and she has like psychic powers and stuff. So she's actually very important in the plot of the manga. Actually, Kay winds up working for her because after her little resistance group gets destroyed, she has to go somewhere. So then she starts working for this group. So yeah, there's a lot they had to eliminate and cut out, and yet they still made a really damn good movie for a 2-hour movie, which is one of its biggest successes. But so that was the other thing. I was trying to think of places to start, but we'll talk about the dub. Of course, both of us have seen this, and I'm one of those snobs that usually likes the original soundtrack with subtitles. But Akira is kind of an exception because I saw it so long ago with the dub. It's kind of ingrained in my mind, and I feel like this is a pretty good dub. This is the dub from 2001 by Pioneer. But the 89 dub, the original English dub, was the first one I saw on VHS too. And I haven't seen it in many years, but I remember it pretty well. And I remember a lot of the key differences. And as Jay and I were discussing, one of the newer Blu-ray releases of this, I still don't have it on Blu-ray, but it's another incentive to get it, is that it includes both dubs. And that is incentive for me, because I have a real fondness for that first dub. For anybody that's familiar with any sort of like Western animation, well, Kaneda is voiced by Cameron Clark, although he's using one of his other names, Jimmy Flinders, for that one. And if you've watched any sort of cartoons over the last 30 years, you've heard Cameron Clark, and probably the most famous role I can give you is that he was the voice of Leonardo on the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles show, and that is basically the voice he uses for Kaneda in that dub. And it's not bad, actually. I don't have any objection to him. Although I do think Johnny Young Bosch, or whatever his name is probably better because he sounds a bit more like a kid. But also, as I was saying to Jay, if I have like I don't really remember what Kay sounded like in the original dub, but in this dub, I'm a little disappointed with Kay's voice because she just sounds way too old. And Kay is supposed to be like 16. Like most of these characters are very young. Like Tetsuo and Kaneda are about 15. Kay's 16, they're young. That's probably another reason why, not just the Japanese factor, they haven't made like even tried to make, or there's been some false starts and some announcements about like a live action movie, because then that would be one of the problems, right? They'd be like, we don't want like characters that young. They would just age them all up. They make them like 25, 26, played by 35-year-olds and
35-year-old white people.
Because Western audiences are just uncomfortable with young people like in serious situations. Like they don't want them in, like, it's okay for like an adventure story, but something like this, like with graphic violence, sexual stuff, they're like, oh no, don't put the young people in that, even though it's ridiculous because that's just a reflection of real life. I mean, this is not real life, but still it has that point. It's just like, young people get caught up in shit. You think, 15 and 16-year-olds didn't fight World War II? They didn't want to, they had to, and stuff. But anyway, so that, I think that's always been another hurdle. And maybe that's just for the best, because as you said, I don't think either, like most people, we don't want to see like 35-year-old white people in these roles. Like either give me the Asian teenagers or forget about it.
And I think after Ghost in the Shell, I don't think we'll have to worry about them trying that anytime soon.
Yeah, I guess Ghost in the Shell kind of flopped. That's been on my Netflix for forever, and I've always meant to give it a shot, but I don't know.
Just why? I mean, I guess I'd like to see what they did with some of the the big scenes of the the film.
There's a couple of scenes I've heard they were fairly faithful,
Yeah.
like visually how they recreated, and that seems worth checking out, I guess. But yeah, I know I'll spend most of the movie just being annoyed.
Yeah, that's bad casting.
Put Scarlett Johansson in everything rule. She can play anything. Remember, there was a little big uproar because she was going to play like a trans character. At least finally, like somebody like there was enough of a pushback where she was like, "Oh yeah, maybe I shouldn't do that." Like, it's okay that I can, race lift, but maybe I shouldn't go any further than that.
Was she playing trans male or a trans female?
I don't know, but either way, she's not suited to.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter to me. Like, she's not trans, so it doesn't work.
She better get on some hormones.
I mean, yeah, I mean, if you put her on some hormones or whatever and make her trans, isn't that basically like the equivalent of like doing like blackface or something with white actor? I mean, really, that's what it is. Because you're taking something like, there's one thing to act in a role, and there's another thing to like, you know, I'm not going to get into that. That's
so you're saying that they should have a trans actor play that role?
Yeah. Well, I mean, whatever role. I mean, I don't know even what the movie was, but the point was it was a trans character. Yes, I believe a trans actor should play a trans role. That doesn't sound hard. That's like a black character should play a black role, right? I don't know. I mean, it's a different thing, right? Because we live in a world now that's a little better, where like just because a character's black doesn't mean that's what the character's all about. But if you go back in for certain movies, yes, the character has to be black, like that's what it's about, right? And now we're kind of at that way with trans too. Like maybe someday trans characters will just be other characters. But right now, if you have a trans character in a movie, that's probably a big fucking part of their character. It might even be the whole point of the movie. So in that case, yes, you should really get a trans actor to do that. That's, you know, that seems like just logic to me.
Did you see the Hilary Swank film?
Boys Don't Cry?
Yeah, that's it. I mean,
yeah.
were you satisfied with her performance there?
No, I think it was a really poor performance.
Didn't she win or get nominated for that?
Yeah, and then she pissed everybody off by referring to Tina as he in her speech.
Oh, wait.
So she really fell on her face.
He was supposed to be a he, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was born Brandon, but he, you know, identified as Tina. So you're supposed to you're supposed to use the pronoun or whatever, what people identify as.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
He really fell on her face by like, I don't think she called her Brandon, but she said like he. So a lot of people got pissed off about that.
It was a female transitioning to a male, so isn't he correct?
Oh yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, it was the other way around.
He said she. She said she.
Right. It was Tina transitioning to Brandon or whatever. I guess there was no physical transition because it wasn't really an option back then. But still, you know, the identity transition, whatever you call it. But no, I think that was a pretty poor job of that person's story. I don't like that movie very much at all. I'm not really a fan of Hilary Swank, but that has nothing to do with that. Like, that's not bias. I just think, you know.
I've heard that is you know, it's loosely based on a true story.
Yeah.
Or they really doctored that script. Like none of that stuff happened. Or didn't happen like that. Like the way
I think they Hollywooded a lot of it up to make some of it more dramatic. And they also did kind of a bad job of like depicting sort of the murderer itself, because it kind of like left some weird doubt there, and I know that made the family mad too. Because I don't know what it's like now, but I remember reading about this years ago and stuff, and like the girlfriend, and I think we talked about this before. There was like this, I don't know, the two girlfriends of the two guys that committed the murder. They were really annoyed at the way like they were depicted, because they basically wanted to say like the only reason they murdered him was because finding out like that he was trans, like that was the main reason. But they were like, no, it's because like they stole money from him. They were just trying to say, hey, they'd murder anybody.
Right.
It's like, you know, they're not transphobic.
We don't discriminate, buddy.
Like it's a weird kind of stance to take. So what they're saying is, you know, like, no, we don't have problems with, you know, trans people or anything. We're equal opportunity murderers. We'll murder whoever pisses us off. It doesn't matter, you know. So I thought that was a really weird line in the sand to draw. Like, we want our boyfriends who are remembered as vicious murderers to be remembered that they would have murdered anybody. They weren't just, you know, bigoted murderers. I guess.
That's funny.
The point.
Yeah,
so,
that's better. That's better to know.
Because it is true in real life that Brandon was, I mean, as part of doing this other life, was kind of, I think it would be going way too far to say con artist, but because part of it was keeping up the thing of, you know, I've always been a man, which he had not been, or, you know, I am a man, biologically born man. He would tell lots of other lies too, right? And so some of that got cut up. So there's other people that have come out saying, oh, you know, he was a thief and a liar and all this, just caught up with him. Yeah, I don't know about that. Like, even if you are a thief and a liar, I don't know if that means you're allowed to be murdered or that justifies it. Like, I would be pretty mad if somebody stole from me, but I wouldn't murder them. But anyway, that's me.
Well, that's not your decision to make. That's call the police, let them handle it.
Yeah. But anyways, and again, it's not like they were shifty people even before the murder. They were, if you're trying to say that Brandon Tina was kind of a shifty character and blah blah blah. Well, so were they. They were also low level criminals at the time. They stole from other people. They just got pissed because he stole from them. Anyway, that's a whole thing. But kind of related. I hope people don't get mad. Is I always found Kay very attractive in this movie, because she almost has a certain androgynous quality.
Yeah.
Like, it's especially pronounced in this. Like, yeah, they almost look. Sometimes it's hard to tell them apart, Kay and Kaneda. But I was always super attracted to Kay. I always thought, like, if she was real, I would have loved to have had a tough girlfriend like her that was like, in a rebel group and stuff. I've always that's the other thing is one of the reasons I love the manga and the movies. I think this has really strong characters.
Mm-hmm. Very, very broad shoulders, and she's really tall, I think, isn't she? I mean, at least she looks that way.
She's probably as tall as Canada anyway, which I mean is kind of a, that's not unheard of with Asian people, right?
Mm.
A lot of Asian men aren't particularly tall, so. But anyway, yeah, so, I'm trying to think of places to go off on. So yeah, let's do characters for a while. I feel like even in just a 2-hour movie, like, the characters have a lot. I'm going to say a lot, not a ton, but they have a decent amount of complexity and depth. Mm-hmm. And I will just say right off that one of the reasons I like this again, of the many millions, is that Kaneda is one of my favorite characters in fiction, period. I love him. And it's great because he's a multifaceted, kind of layered character. He's our reluctant kind of hero, and he's by no means perfect. It's even more played up in that. Like, he's the very definition of a snot-nosed punk. Like, it's exactly what he is. And he's a skirt chaser and all this stuff. But as the movie goes on, it's revealed that he does have sort of like a code of honor and a lot of integrity. And the number one thing you can say about him is that he's brave. He has a ton of guts and nerve. In this and the manga, he just headfirst throws himself into danger over and over again, and many times he did not have to do it. Like, you could say, yeah, it's funny. Like he gets into Kay because there's a girl I haven't seen before. I'm hey, I'm gonna get in good with this girl type thing. But he sticks with it. If he was just in it, because he's thinking maybe he can get laid, he's pretty damn dedicated because he basically more or less has to join her rebel group that he had no interest in. Because he's just a juvenile delinquent. He doesn't have a cause like her. He's not part of like he likes to fuck with the establishment, but not the way she is. Like, she's trying to enact real change. And again, you can say that Kay's group, well, how good are they? They do commit acts of terrorism where people really do get hurt and possibly even die. So there's all sorts of shades of gray. These aren't black and white characters. Everybody has their good points, but also their flaws. And Kaneda is just one of my favorite tremendously flawed characters. I love him. He's got a chip on his shoulder and an attitude, and you would totally understand. It's totally understandable given the world he's had to grow up in. He was obviously some sort of orphan. He had to grow up like in a group home or orphanage or whatever, and like society's more or less given up on him. So he's fighting back at society and his motorbike gang. And to his credit, we never see in this or the manga him actually doing anything to normal citizens. He's only fighting with other gangs and gang members. Although it is true, they're kind of heedless of the collateral damage they call. There's a good shot in the opening part of the bike fight where one of the guys they knock off the road comes right through the window of a restaurant, which is pretty cool. But yeah, that really sets the whole tone. I said I wouldn't do this, but I keep everything leads to another thing. But yeah, just that opening motorcycle chase just sets the whole tone for the movie that you're really in for something special. The colors and the lights, and we will get into more detail on that because I think those are really special things too. The action. Just giving us the backdrop of the city and really quickly establishing sort of what kind of environment that the events of this movie are going to take place in and stuff. But yeah, the characters, and of course, I think the Colonel is a great character because while and he, in many ways, he's just sort of the stereotypical military guy. He has a lot of conviction and courage and morals too. And when he stages the coup d'etat, he's not doing it as a power grab because he cares about that. He's realizing he's the only sort of sane man in this. Like, he actually wants to keep the city from being destroyed and people dying. And he feels like, you know, he's surrounded by a bunch of corrupt, incompetent idiots that are just more concerned with power grabs. So he basically has to do the coup for the greater good. It's not for his benefit. It's because he's like, somebody has to steer the ship here, and I guess it's going to be me because you're all asshole idiots. You know, and also, there's less of it in the movie, but also in the manga, he eventually gets sort of a begrudging respect for Kaneda, even though Kaneda represents so much of the stuff that, you know, the Colonel hates. The Colonel's about order, you know, he's about order and rules and stuff, and of course, Kaneda's, you know, a punk that wants to, you know, give the finger to the rules and all this stuff, and in the manga, he often refers to the Colonel as the skinhead, you know, because he thinks of him as sort of like a fascist or whatever. But yeah, I think the Colonel's a really good character too, because you see that, like, for his gruff exterior and the way he tries to make things black and white and simple, he often talks about, like, you see that he has so much contempt for, like, the bureaucracy around him. He's also really annoyed by the scientists, because the scientists are just concerned about, you know, their discoveries and what they can learn. Again, they're not thinking about the greater good. They're not thinking about the society. They're not thinking about Neo Tokyo. They're thinking, oh, if I could discover this, you know, he's the only one that's really grounded in sort of reality and has sort of a moral compass. So yeah, I really like the Colonel, and he's also very brave. You know, he stands up to Tetsuo, doesn't flinch. There's a great part where when the shit hit the fan and Tetsuo's become the big weird monster, and he's just got a handgun. He's like, "Come on!" You know? Like, wow, really? Like, he's no coward. So yeah, for you know, a sci-fi type movie where character doesn't necessarily have to be the most important thing because you have other stuff going on. They do a really great job of having some fully formed characters that I think are really interesting and that you actually care about. You want to, you know, you care about what happens to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you know, Tetsuo as well.
Yeah, he evokes a certain amount of pathos.
But yeah, I feel like once he came into contact with the child and started, you know, he started developing his powers, it changed him. You know, changed who he is.
Oh,
because, you know, at his heart, he's a good person, but
yeah, he's a good person that just couldn't. You know, it's that old adage about power, right? Power corrupts absolutely. Yeah. Power corrupts absolutely, and he just couldn't handle it. So yeah, he's a he has pathos and somewhat a sympathetic character. But at the same time, I think most of us, you know, think, well, that still doesn't justify his behavior, though. I mean, he just goes kind of mad with power, and he becomes very callous and even calculating, cruel. And you get it, he's used to sort of being a perpetual victim and always feeling like he's being put down by Kaneda. And that's another thing I like about Kaneda. Kaneda never flinches. He never like gives in and thinks, oh, I'm responsible for this, or oh, I used to pick on Tetsuo and give him a hard time. Like he's like, no, like, it doesn't matter. Yeah, I was hard on him, whatever, you know. He doesn't mean he can do this. So I like that too. The Kaneda never has any doubt. He never thinks, oh, poor Tetsuo and stuff. And he also arrives pretty quickly at the conclusion. It's like, you know, there's no saving Tetsuo. Right. Like, he's my friend. I'll have to kill him. And again, that's when I come back to sort of his code of honor. He didn't have to throw himself into this. And that's another difference in the dub, too, that I remember. So there's that part where after he and Kay had been let out of the prison and they're in the canal there, remember one of the kids comes and takes Kay away?
Yeah.
Because they're going to use her. In the original dub, all I can remember, I forget some of the dialogue, but in some of it, like, Canada just sort of is like, leave my friends alone, or something like that. All I can really remember. Like, he might have said more, but in, like, the newer dub, it's a little better because, like, he says kind of the same thing, but he also says a really good line. He says, if someone's going to kill Tetsuo, it should be us. He's our friend, you know? Yeah. And he really does stick to that. Like, so, yeah, he's got sort of a code of honor that you just have to respect.
Mm-hmm.
But getting back to we'll finish up, I guess, on some of the differences in the dub that I can remember before we go any further. The other thing is, so the other Esper children, the ones, of course, the whole thing is they're not really children. They, you know, they should all be at least in their 40s, according to, like, the timeline and stuff. But the medication they're on and stuff stunts them and puts them in, like, sort of a weird, permanent stasis as children, although they get kind of withered too. And so one thing that's good about the Pioneer dub is that it's like, well, if it keeps them looking like children, they'll probably sound like children. Because in the original dub, at least one of them does not still sound like a child. The one in the chair sounds like somebody doing a really bad Marlon Brando impersonation, like from The Godfather. I swear. I'm sure I'm not remembering that wrong. I'm going to find out for sure, but I just remember him being like, oh, yeah, like, I don't know. I can never think of the line. I always go back to the Godfather one. Make you an offer you can't refuse. Like, that's what he sounds like in that dub, and I have no idea why. It's a really weird choice. And I can't even remember. The other two might have still sounded like children, which would really throw the whole thing out of whack, right? So yeah, the way I've always read it in the manga and stuff like that is like, yeah, they're not children, but because of the drugs they're on, yeah, their voices would probably still be children too. Like, it always made sense to me. They look like children. They would probably sound like children. So those are the main things I remember about the dub. Was that you had Kaneda by Cam Clark using the Leonardo voice and some of that other things. Oh yeah, I remember another thing that we talked about that I thought was funny is that yeah, you'll often see like the Colonel getting very frustrated and angry, and he'll grit his teeth. And you know, even in the Pioneer dub, you'll hear him be like a few times. But like, I swear, I'm sure I'm not misremembering this either. He sounds like a growling dog in the original dub. He's going like like he's snarling in some of them. It's really funny. But anyway, that's something I'm gonna have to make a priority in the next few days. See if I can track down, maybe online, just watch the original English dub, because yeah, I think the newer dub is better, particularly the translation. I think the translation's off and wonky in a few places. Oh, here's the other thing I remember. So there's this part where in the original dub, it's the part where Tetsuo he's going down to hunt. He's now at the Olympic site, and he's on his way down underground to the cryo chamber where Akira is. And there's this part where he finally like gets there, and it's like when he first sees like the big capsule thing that says Akira on it. I can't even remember what he says, even though I just watched the movie. I think he said something like, "Oh, nice place you got here," or something, and then he sort of like shakes his head or something. I swear, I remember this perfectly. In the original English dub, when Tetsuo looks at it, he says, "Carelessness, utter carelessness." You're like, what? What the fuck does that mean?
He's not happy with the way that they're stored. He's not happy with the cryogenics.
I guess so, right? But it still seems really weird.
Oh, absolutely.
Nowhere. And I guarantee you that is not the line in the manga anyway. But anyway, so unless you have any other remembrances of the dub.
I don't really remember the original dub. I'd like to watch it again.
As I've said, yeah, apparently the newest version, at least in North America, Blu-ray of Akira that you can get includes that dub too, so that's cool. We'll definitely have to get that at some point. Yeah, the other weird thing is, yeah, so back in the early 2000s when I got this, there was on DVD. There was another DVD that had this as the cover. The cover was the big explosion thing, and it was the special edition. And at least in Canada, it was super expensive. It was like $50 or something, and I think it was like 3 discs. Anyway, and then I thought, hey, now that I would love to get that Blu-ray. As far as I know, that special edition still does not exist in Blu-ray. Like, you can get a 25th anniversary edition, but it's more or less exactly this, just on Blu-ray. But now there is a newer version that at least has the other dub and stuff. So I'm a little confused why that special edition has not gotten a Blu-ray release. And I did find there's like a sort of a deluxe type of edition that's like, I think in the UK, it's a Region 2 one. So that does me no good. It has a weird cover, cover I'd never seen before.
Who released that? What company?
Oh man, the weird one. The
one in your hand. I was just curious who has the rights.
Pioneer, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah, it only says Pioneer on here.
So Streamline Pictures is who originally released it.
Yeah. Yeah, and they made
because I mean, it seems like an easy cash grab, right? To put out a huge like deluxe edition of Akira, like that's going to sell.
Yeah, absolutely, it's going to sell.
So I'm just wondering why it hasn't happened yet. I mean,
yeah, that does seem odd because and you can still, I mean, probably like online, like Amazon or something, you can still buy that the special edition DVD, but you'd be like, well, I want the Blu-ray, even though, as we said, like I'm a huge fan of 2D animation. It's one of my favorite things in the world. But if there's anything that really doesn't benefit much from Blu-ray, it's 2D animation. Like I have like the only thing I ever really double dipped on is because I'm so into it is those Studio Ghibli films. I cannot see the difference between the
Really?
Blu-ray and the DVDs. They look pretty much exactly the same. Like, I mean, there's only so much cleaning up you can do, right? With this, it's cell animation. Maybe you can remove some cell dirt, but by the time you're into the early 2000s, cell dirt isn't really an issue anymore. That's already been taken care of by digital stuff. So yeah, if you're getting any sort of like 2D animation from the 21st century, DVD to Blu-ray, as far as I can tell, is very little difference. Again, I'm such a huge fan of this; it's certainly worth getting on Blu-ray, but I don't think I'll really be able to tell much difference in the quality.
I watched it was an HD transfer that's on Hulu right now. They actually have the dub and the subtitle version, which is cool.
Mm-hmm.
But it looked really good. I mean, I believe it was HD transfer, and yeah, I was really pleased with how it looked. So I mean, yeah, I don't know. You may be right. It may not be able to look any better than that. So it's not like the Ultra 4K edition is gonna
exactly
be a huge improvement. I mean, I'm sure it'll look a little better, but
we can get into some of the visuals then. I mean, obviously, it's just got to have a great artistic style based on Katsuhiro Otomo's thing. But I mean, you know, this is a standard manga, awesome detail, but still black and white. So this movie is really benefits, you know, from giving us the world with light and color. And when you think about lighting in a movie, you don't think about an animated movie. It's not really something, because light isn't even really light in an animated movie. It's something completely created. But so when I say lighting effects, obviously it's completely different from a live action movie with lighting effects. But honestly, when I talk about a movie with like some of the best lighting effects ever, Akira's right up there. The light in this movie is so important to its look, and it is spellbinding because, you know, let's face it, it gives us that cyberpunk look of something like, say, a Blade Runner, which really set the standard. Blade Runner, you know, came out in '82, which is the same year the first manga came out, and they both, you know, influenced each other. And obviously, Blade Runner, the look of that movie, one of the key visuals it used for that sort of cyberpunk style, which was only just being made at the time, of course, was the real city of Tokyo, because Tokyo was the first city, and it's known today too for having so much neon, because they were I can't remember the name of the square, but there's that square in Tokyo that's just full of neon signs, and that all began back in 1957 when the company that will become Sony unveiled their name change. They had a different name, then they became Sony, and they had the very first one. And then eventually, just over the years, by the time you got into like the mid to late 60s, it was just that whole area just got full of neon. And that was one of the major influences for the look of Blade Runner. They were like, yeah, we're going to do Los Angeles 2019, same year as the movie version of Akira, which I know was what you wanted to point out. Yeah, 2019 seems a very special cyberpunk year.
And I'm disappointed with how it turned out.
Yeah. So there's two reasons for why they used Tokyo. One was for the neon, because they think, yeah, that gives a great look for this future type thing. And also something I think we talked about before was, you know, in the last 2 years, because of Japan being such a superpower, and it is economic and stuff like that, people often talk about how it's almost, if we're not into like the era of China ruling the world yet, we're right on the cusp of it, right? But back in the 80s, people believed that of Japan. They thought it wasn't we're only a few decades away from Japan taking over the world, because Japan, while smaller than China, its economy was absolutely booming in the 80s. And they were just ahead of the curve in almost everything that mattered. They were like kicking everybody's ass when it came to like electronics and cars and stuff and stuff. So that was another reason why they wanted to have a Tokyo look in Blade Runner, because they wanted to show a Los Angeles that reflect that, and that's why they have like quite a large Asian presence of like just characters and stuff in that movie, because they're thinking, you know, because it was very much the 80s mindset was like, yeah, in a few decades, like the whole world's going to be kind of remade in Japan's image, and that's kind of the way we see it like now with China, right? Because eventually, actually, by the time the 80s ended, the boom was kind of over. Japan didn't go into recession or anything like that. They just did not, you know, take the next leap that a lot of people expected. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, yeah, that was really what people thought was going to happen, you know, in like the mid 80s was, oh, Japan's the new, you know, they're going to be making everything, you know, because like you said, they were leading the industry in nearly everything. I was trying to think of that Michael Keaton movie, it has kind of a racist title, where he goes.
You mean You mean Michael Crichton?
No,
Do
Michael
you mean?
Keaton.
Oh, okay. Because I'm
He
okay. Black Rain?
no. It's a like a drama comedy movie.
Oh man, I don't know.
Here, let me find it for you. It's Gung Ho. Yeah.
Oh, okay. No, I don't know
It's
that. Yeah, this is
it's
more
all
your area. Okay.
it's all.
Yeah,
Well, I
tell
mean,
me
it's
because
not
I
a
don't
bad
know.
movie.
No, tell me about it because I don't know. It's not a
Well,
movie I know.
it's all about him. Basically, they're trying to. The Japanese company's trying to come to America to make cars in America, trying to keep it, here, and it's basically the whole, the argument between, damn it, we want to keep it here in America to save America cars,
Right.
whatever. But you know, the Japanese are more efficient. But
Right.
yeah, it's not a bad movie at all. It's one I was really trying to track down because I was trying to watch all of Michael Keaton's catalog.
Yeah, this mindset, like you said, was reflected in quite a few movies and things at the
Mm-hmm.
time. And why I said Michael Crichton was because around this time, Michael Crichton, who was always on the cutting edge of everything that was going on, right? He wrote a novel called Rising Sun,
Mm-hmm.
which is about a murder in like a business tower, but it very much centers on, it's full of digressions of him talking about like Japan's influence on the world economy, because the whole thing is like it's like a Japanese company with a president. Maybe the president is murdered. I can't remember. They made a movie of it in '93 with Wesley Snipes and what a weird pairing, Wesley Snipes and Sean Connery.
Yeah, so I thought it was in there.
But yeah, I'm pretty sure the book was written in the '80s, and it's another sort of reflection of that because a lot of Michael Crichton, like in his techno thriller stuff, he liked to go on digressions and talk about things like in Jurassic Park, he'll talk about genetics and stuff like that. Well, in this book, he goes on digressions, sort of talking about like the world economy, and I'll talk about like Japan's role in it. Of course, at this time, Japan was at the forefront and stuff. There was another one too that kind of had that vibe.
I just watched a film called Other People's Money with Danny DeVito.
Oh yeah, I've heard of that.
And that's right around that same period of time, and he's saying the exact same thing. How Japan's going to be ruling the world.
Yeah, and we've also, I think on the Sausage Factory, because we like the movie so much, we even talked about that angle, the economics type, or I guess sort of the economical angle of Die Hard. We talk about how Die Hard's like such like the sort of a movie about like sort of fighting against the greed that came with the 80s, because it was all because you had the bad guys, they were all wearing designer suits and they were all very white collar. It was all about ripping people off because they weren't really terrorists, right? They were robbers and they wanted money, and he read they're very cosmopolitan, and we have like the blue collar cop fighting against them, but also at the forefront of that is, well, what's the name of the building? Nakatomi Plaza, because again, it's a company who's headed by a very rich and successful Japanese guy, and they're kind of saying, this is the way the world's going now. Like, even if you work for a corporation in America, it's probably owned by the Japanese. Yeah, so that's another interesting thing. Came out the same year as Akira, '88. So yeah, there was quite a few things that had that sort of bent to it. And Akira is interesting because, of course, it kind of like is an inversion of that, because it's like, oh, maybe that was going to happen, but then Akira happened, and now Japan's completely fucked up. And of course, there's parallels certainly to be made of post-war Japan. They were the only country so far, hopefully ever, to go through having atomic weapons used on them. And the Akira is obviously kind of another sort of version of that. Here's another horrible, devastating thing that happens to Japan. Fictional, of course, but here's what it's done to them, and here's their attempt to like move out of it. Because as you said, they're kind of vague about the details of World War III and what happened, but it's obvious that at the end of World War III, whether Japan won or lost the war, or was on the side that won or lost, even maybe they weren't devastated in the same way as they were at the end of the Second World War. But even if they weren't, they obviously did not get the outside aid that they got at the end of the Second World War, because don't worry, I'm not going to get into the ethics or politics of the U.S. using nukes on Japan, but I will say that one thing the U.S. did to their credit was help rebuild the Japanese economy. The U.S. poured a ton of money into Japan in the 40s and 50s, trying to help them get back on their feet. And it basically worked, because, over the next few years, Japan would not only get back on their feet, but again, come back and be a world leader in that and stuff. So, but anyway, we get the feeling that whatever the aftermath of World War III was this time, Japan did not receive any outside economic aid, because while Neo Tokyo has its glitzy side, and people you do see that there are people that are living okay lives with jobs and stuff. There's still a huge section of the population in the city that is completely messed up. But yeah,
it looks like every 30 years we're getting some sort of nuclear explosion in Tokyo or in Japan.
Yeah, because I mean that's how. Although this one, yeah, well, it's a little sunnier in the movie than in the manga, because in the movie they basically kind of avert that from happening. I mean, Tetsuo, wreaks a certain amount of a significant amount of destruction, but he doesn't destroy the city or anything. And people are wondering about the ending if they want to know what happened. Basically, what happened was, unlike the manga, where Akira has actually still been alive all this time, Akira's already dead. But through the efforts of the other three espers, they kind of revive Akira. And what Akira does is he basically bounces Tetsuo into some sort of parallel dimension where he can't do any harm. And then why you have that whole thing about the scientist talking about, like, this says the creation of the universe. Well, that's what Tetsuo does. Tetsuo sort of initiates a Big Bang and creates his own universe where he can be God in it, which seems like it seems like a pretty good reward for somebody that went on like a killing spree of destruction. Whereas in the manga, he just gets killed. In the manga, he can't contain Akira's power, and Akira fucking kills him.
That seems like the more realistic ending, but
right. But besides that, also in the manga, at the end of this one, Tetsuo does initiate a cataclysm, just not on the same level as what Akira did. But in the movie, he doesn't even get to do that. It's funny when I'm. Is it the end of this one, or is it the end of the second one? Yeah, it might even be the end of the second one, actually. But anyway, so yeah, I don't even think it's the end of this one. I think it's the end of the second volume. But anyway, at the end of one of the volumes, I think it's probably the second one. It's not the first one. Yeah, Tetsuo does kind of cut loose, and he really shakes up Neo Tokyo. Again, he doesn't completely wipe it out and destroy it and like do what Akira did, but he does way more than what he did in the movie. And then the rest of the volumes picking up is sort of like a post-Tetsuo society. Again, there's no government or anything. It's just sort of a lawless world full of people just trying to get by in sort of a devastated landscape. Which I love. I love that kind of thing. And it's too bad you couldn't put that in the movie. But if you did, you'd have to make the movie super long. So I don't have any complaints about that. But again, it is one of the things I really like about this, is I really like seeing that people living in the ruins of Tokyo after Tetsuo's own devastation. And as I said, it gets a lot more political because the rest of the world does get involved. Towards the end, American forces are right off the coast. They've got like a whole bunch of like aircraft carriers and ships just on standby trying to take Tetsuo out and stuff because they realize he poses a threat to the whole world and stuff. So there's a whole lot of other stuff going on that they couldn't put into the movie. But you understand why.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I mean 2 hours is a fairly long. I mean, maybe would have worked in a miniseries type format, but
maybe we'll see that someday. It'd be pretty cool. I'm not against that. But yeah, as usual, every time I think of something, 10 more things occur to me. But getting back to the lighting, I just adore the lighting in this movie. Like, it's hard. You don't think of it as an animated movie, but it's so important. Everything comes to it, and of course, it has a nice ending where it ends with like the light we hadn't seen much, which is sunlight. Sunlight finally ends it after seeing all this artificial light, but just everything is just so beautiful. The movie opens with the flickering light over the bar, kind of letting you know that it's a seedy part of town. You get to see the beautiful color trails that the bikes leave when they fly off onto the highway. Looks amazing. The whole city is lit up with neon. It's also used by the forces of authority when the police and the military are there. They're putting like spotlights on everything. That's the first thing they do is like get a light on that and stuff. And you have characters hiding in the shadows. There's great use of that in the sewer scene where you have the flying things and people ducking their lights and. Yeah, so, usually I'm saying a million times because I'm all wound up. But my point is, when you're dealing with an animated movie, particularly a two-dimensional hand-drawn animation, you don't usually think of lighting and lighting effects, but it's everything in this movie. The whole visual style is based on the way light is used, and it's breathtaking, honestly. And it's something that can't really be accomplished too well in a black and white manga, as great as it is. So that's one of the things that makes it so great that they did make a movie about it, because it really did deserve to be seen in that way. Now, of course, Epic Comics, the short-lived imprint of Marvel in the 80s and early 90s, was the first to translate the manga and bring it over here. And they actually colorized it. I don't even know if they finished it, but it was also notable. It was notable because it was the first time an American company published and translated a manga over here, and it was also the first time any comic was colored through the use of computers. They did digital
Really?
coloring for that. I don't own any of those, but I remember years ago I had the opportunity to buy a couple and I didn't. Hopefully I can track them down again because they do look really good. It's on really like glossy paper too. It's great stuff.
Yeah, I was going to ask you how you feel about the colorizing that.
It looked really good.
Yeah.
It looked really good. Yeah, because I know what you mean. Sometimes when you have black and white things, you don't want to see them colorized, but I think Akira just begs to be colorized.
I'm a big fan of really popping colors.
Mm-hmm.
But I understand. Some books in black and white are in black and white for a reason.
Yeah, same thing with movies. There's certain movies where you don't want to see that colorized. Black and white just has that effect. I was thinking about this just the other day because movie we almost wound up doing. Maybe we'll do a little later on. It's a movie I like a lot. Big famous movie, Bogart, The Treasure of the Sierra Madre. That's a movie in the 40s, so of course that's black and white. Now, if you were talking about, say, Bogart's other two really famous films, Casablanca and the noir one, The Maltese Falcon, if anybody talked about colorizing them, I'd be like, no fucking way. Like, ugh. Mm-hmm. But I think The Treasure of Sierra Madre would benefit from being colored.
Really?
Because, it takes place like in Mexico and out in the wilds on a mountain and stuff, and I think the color would actually help it. So it's kind of a case-by-case thing for someone like me. I mean, certainly it looks fine. It looks good in black and white. It looks good, but I think it would benefit from color.
Yeah, if it's done right, I've seen a lot of really bad jobs.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've seen Gone with the Wind in black and white and color, and I certainly think it is better in color.
Really?
I mean, it just again, it has such a backdrop, right? It's like it's the American South back in the days around the Civil War, and you have big lush plantations and stuff. You have that scene of the burning of Atlanta. I think that just pops a lot better in color than black and white.
So, I don't think I've ever seen it in color before.
I think it comes on TV in color these days.
I'm sure it does, yeah.
But yeah, it's a huge commitment to make. It's like 3.5 hours, right? Like I haven't watched it in like 5 or 6 years, and not in any mood to watch it again anytime soon. But I'm just saying, one of the more famous, high-profile ones to be colorized, I thought that was pretty good. But yeah, I am mostly on the side of not doing it to most movies, just like Roger Ebert and some of those were in the 80s, because that was a big thing in the 80s. That's when they started doing it. They're like, hey, we can restore old movies, we can colorize them, and like Roger Ebert was so vehemently against it, he called it a form of vandalism. So
I can understand that. I mean, it's the same people that are yelling at George Lucas for changing his films,
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I totally get that. Because, I mean, you have a large segment of the population that refuses to watch black and white films.
Which is really a shame.
Refuses. Like, I mean, I would say even people, in our generation,
Yeah. I don't know why. I mean, especially nowadays, what you can do is you can digitally, remaster and clean up a black and white movie and make it look really good, right, but, without colorizing it. I noticed that when we were doing some with the Ozu film.
Yeah.
Like I said, you see, like, some of these movies are super old. They're like from the 30s, right? And when you see what they looked like in the 30s, and you see what a Blu-ray restoration can do, it's so crisp and clear. It's like it doesn't even need color. Look how much they've improved it without having to mess with color. Like I said, I am mostly on the side of not doing it, leaving the movie as it is. But it is true that for the vast majority of these black and white movies, they're only in black and white because that was all that was available to the director. The director might have made it in color if they could have. It's not like they were deliberately making it black and white. It was because that was the only thing that was available. So I don't know. So it's always interesting now when movies, nowadays when movies make that. In fact, the last movie I just watched the other day was Roma, and that is in black and white, which is obviously a deliberate choice by the director, because obviously you could colorize it. And I mean, I don't know. I felt more like of a statement than anything that really helped the movie. I almost felt like they were just trying to make a statement that this was kind of like an artsy movie, so they were going to make it black and white. Like, I don't think it would have been so different colored. But again, that's, a different sort of example, because that's a movie that just came out, not like a movie from back in the days where black and white was all that was available to you. I know I said this before on the show, but it always strikes me as odd is like the way audiences perceive things based on the times we live in and what we're used to.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, of course, audiences that grew up with black and white movies, when color was first coming in, most of those audiences did not like it being used in most cases because they associated color with meaning like dreamlike and stuff. Like, they thought, like, I guess maybe because they associate with, like, say, Wizard of Oz, because Wizard of Oz, of course, is famous for starting in black and white, but once she gets to Oz, boom, everything's in color. That seemed to make a real impression on most audiences, in that they only associated color with fantasy and dreams and stuff. They thought the idea of just taking a normal everyday movie and putting in color was like some kind of way of like making it seem unreal, which is weird because real life is in color. Real life's not black and white. Real life's in color. And yet that's the way audiences perceived color when it first came out. They thought, okay, it's good that we can colorize movies now, but it shouldn't become the norm. It should only be reserved for like moments when we're trying to like have a dream-like atmosphere. Like, that's really what people thought, which seems so bizarre, from our point of view, but that's how they saw it.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. But some things I was noticing about this film.
Sure.
In 1989, a Japanese film came out called Tetsuo the Iron Man.
Oh yeah, I know it.
And obviously that's one of the characters' names in this film, and he kind of turns into this like weird cyberpunk flesh / mechanical thing.
Yeah.
And that's what the whole premise of Tetsuo is, the Iron Man. I don't know. I didn't know if there was any correlation because it came out a year later.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it wouldn't be surprising if there was.
Maybe I'm reaching, but
yeah, it's possible. I have seen that, although I don't remember too well. But I remember the look. I remember the look very well. What he looked like when he transformed and stuff.
And the another thing I was going to mention is towards the end, they used the lasers fired from space.
Yeah.
And that sounds a lot like the the Star Wars program that Ronald Reagan always talked about, that the Strategic Defense Initiative.
Yeah.
And I was like, maybe they got the idea from that, because they're like, in the future, we're going to be all shooting lasers down from space at each other.
Yeah. Even though, as it stands right now, and it has for many years, it's not supposed to. It's been in a law for I can't tell you how long. It's an international law. No country is allowed to put weapons in space. It's just we're just going to find out who breaks that law first, right?
Mm-hmm.
Someone's going to do it.
Uh-huh.
But as it stands, that is an international accord. No nation is allowed to store or station weapons in space. The same thing happened at the start of the 20th century with Antarctica, and that's still a rule too. Countries aren't allowed to put any sort of weaponry in Antarctica. It's been suspected that the Soviets did it for many years anyway, but I don't think there's any hard proof of it. But that's actually part of the plot of a graphic novel I really like that they made a really crappy adaptation of, even though I still kind of like it. Whiteout. Whiteout is kind of like about that, because it's about like people at like one of those outposts, one of those research stations in Antarctica, and they get drawn into a plot of finding like I think a hidden Soviet weapons cache or something, or at least there was a plane crash or something. Yeah. And so maybe they weren't actually doing it on purpose. I think the plane just crashed and it had like some weapons on board. Anyway, it's a really bland movie with Kate Beckinsale that I still kind of like, but it's not nearly as good as the graphic novel. Very good graphic novel by I believe Greg Rucka.
Mm-hmm.
Really good.
It's been on my list for a while. I want to pick it up. I'm just kind of waiting for a price drop, and it isn't doing that.
They just came out with a good edition of it too, like a new edition a year ago. I got it. Yeah, and it includes the sequel too, so it's both together. The sequel's not as good, but still, it's good that you get them together, right? I remember the sequel pissed some people off because in it the main character has sex with this guy, and I think because she was kind of like butch, A lot of people assumed she was like a lesbian character, and they liked that. So I think they were kind of annoyed when they found out she wasn't lesbian. But it's funny, yeah. She was kind of like a butch character, and then of course for the movie, they're like Kate Beckinsale.
It's damn Kate Beckinsale. Come on.
Adaptational attractiveness, as they call it. Everyone must be hot.
That's the world we live in now.
Especially the bad guy. Especially the bad guy. We need the audience to really want to fuck the bad guy. I have no idea why that's important, but it is.
Yeah, if it's a female, it has to be a super hot female protagonist.
Yeah. But there's stuff here probably about the film. I'm trying to think, because obviously there was a lot of stuff. We had characters, we did lighting and coloring. But yeah, I guess we were sort of touching, like you said, on somewhat kind of political themes and stuff. The ideas of countries using weapons of mass destruction, countries perhaps having them in space. But yeah, Soul's a pretty cool idea. And I'm sure that will happen, possibly even in our lifetimes, even though, as it stands, that's not supposed to be legal.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's a pretty cool... That's a pretty cool idea, too. I can't remember, it's been a while since I read the manga, but I can't remember if Soul is a secret or not. They might be something like another thing they don't want the Americans to know. Because can you imagine just how uneasy that would make any country? Imagine finding out North Korea had one of those. Like, oh my god. But yeah. We can't stop Tetsuo. We'll use the power of the sun to stop him. Like, it gets so crazy.
I also noticed that one of the children in the dub version sounded like Charlie Brown, the one that talks the least.
One in the chair? That is the one in the chair, isn't it?
Is it? Yeah, you may be right. Yeah.
Takashi's the one who talks the most. And then I can't remember what he sounded like held up, but man, the kid puts nothing into it in the new dub. We are going like couldn't they have at least done a new? I mean, I don't want to be hard on kid actors, but couldn't they at least gotten some other takes out of him? It's like we need to, like everything he says is so bland and emotionless.
The girl's voice is really annoying too.
She's not much better. They're both really bland and emotionless. She's like, then Akira will come before we can. Like, it's really stilted. Like, they both give a really stilted, emotionless delivery that drives me nuts. I can't remember if that was better in the old dub or not. But in the Japanese dub, it's the kids actually put some oomph into it.
Yeah,
you know, those kids sound like those kids sound like they.
Maybe that was the direction. I mean, maybe that's what they were going for. I don't know.
I don't know. I don't like it. I can tell you that.
Be really monotone.
Yeah, I'm mostly satisfied with the Pioneer dub, but that's one of my issues. And again, the K sounds way too old. Like it kind of breaks the reality because it might make people think maybe she is older. Well, she's not. She's like a year older than Canada. She's 16 at the oldest, and that voice, she sounds like she's 40.
Yeah, she's got a real April O'Neil vibe about her. Like mid-30s woman's gonna do it on her own type of vibe.
Yeah. I really like.
I don't need a man.
Yeah, I really like Kay, and yet by the time the manga, like, it's kind of left ambiguous in this. Like, she at least by the time the movie's over, it's like, okay, she Kaneda's won her over to a certain extent. Obviously, he's shown his bravery, and she likes him, but you don't really know what's going to happen. By the end of the manga, it's pretty much established that they are a boyfriend and girlfriend. But again, it's totally believable because you have 2,000 pages to go through it, and you really see the way that, like, he wins her over, and it's not just like, okay, she's going over with like that sexist idiot. Like, you really see like how it makes sense. Like, she's not just like sacrificing her values or something just to be with the guy. It doesn't feel forced at all. Like, by the time it's over, it feels like he totally earned it, and it makes a lot of sense. It's like, because they're still in a weird post-apocalyptic world, right? And she realizes he's a good guy to be with because he's reliable, and he's tough, and he's brave, and he's resourceful. Yeah, so they very much are together by the end of the manga, and it doesn't feel forced in the slightest. Like, it makes perfect sense. It's very satisfying, actually. You totally get how he won her over.
Mm-hmm.
But the movie still does a good job, even though it's condensed, of just showing like the good qualities that Kaneda has. Like, yeah, he's a bit of an ass, and he's no perfect shining hero, but he has some really good qualities that I find very endearing, and he makes him one of my very favorite characters. I don't think the original dub had swearing in it.
Really, that doesn't surprise me.
Because I can remember like the first time I saw the Pioneer dub, like one of the first thing Tetsuo says is like when he almost wipes out on the bike and he's getting on the bike and he goes "fuck" like that. Like I remember being a little taken aback because I'm positive he doesn't say that in the original. Like I think that's the only time "fuck" is actually said, but there's a few other times where they'll say like ass or shit or whatever or hell. But I don't think anybody says "fuck" in the original dub. Even though you see it in graffiti a few times, it's written on the walls in a few places.
Yeah, there's the some female frontal nudity, full frontal, or not full frontal, but which is kind of considering when it came out, I'm kind of surprised they got that past the censors.
Sure, and again, Kaori would she'd be like underage, I guess, right? Kaori would only be about 15 or 16. But still, it's much less graphic and what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know. Than it is in the manga. So because Kaori in this is introduced near the beginning as like one of like the delinquent girls that hangs out with the gang and sort of like Tetsuo's girlfriend, but it's not that at all in the manga. In the manga, she only shows up about halfway. This is after Tetsuo has leveled half the city and sort of taken over. So basically, what's not in the movie is at this point is okay. So Tetsuo's had his first big cataclysm. His tidal waves. He's wiped out a lot of the city. Now there's no government or anything. Now it's just sort of a bunch of factions, and he's leading it with Akira. Akira's with him now. Like he's using Akira as a figurehead. Akira, if people are curious what Akira's like, oh, he's actually in the manga. Well, he's so consumed. He's been so consumed by his power that Akira is a blank slate. He doesn't have a personality. He doesn't have lines of dialogue. He just sort of goes along. So basically, Tetsuo leads like the biggest group because he has people that follow him, and Akira's his figurehead. But one of the things that Tetsuo does, like that I'm sure they were like, we can't put this in the movie, is like he forms like a harem of girls for himself. And in the manga, Kaori's just one of them. She's like one of his sex slaves. But she does get some characterizations. But she's not just one. She does get some characterization. Like he does like start to get to know her, and she starts to like him a bit. But that's what she is in the movie. And I think she survives the manga, which is weird because a lot more people get killed and stuff in the manga than in the movie. But I think she survives the manga now I think about it. She gets a pretty terrible death in the movie. Other characters that like also get bigger roles and stuff is like Clown, actually. The leader of the Clown gang, he actually plays a big role in later volumes of the manga because he teams up with Kaneda to try to help take down Tetsuo.
That's cool.
Because in this first volume, the first thing Tetsuo does with his power is he ousts Clown and takes over that gang. That's the first thing he does. He starts because that gang has like access to the drugs he needs that keeps his head from hurting. So that's like the first thing he does. But Clown plays a big role, and I'm pretty sure he survives too. But he disappears for like the whole middle section, like the last 2 volumes, and he plays a fairly big role in trying to help them.
His name is just Clown?
Yeah, I think it's just Clown. And even though he doesn't get much screen time or dialogue, I love Kai, because Kai just seems like such a nice guy. I love Kai's reaction when he finds out they're still alive. He's like, what? He's so happy. I love how his best friends are Kei and Kai.
Yeah, I know. It's confusing.
But I like Kai. He's the little guy with the tie, for people that don't remember. Who he survives too. He watches Tetsuo murder Yamagata. That happens off screen. The only thing that I don't think is super awesome about this movie is the music. I think is just okay.
I like it's in the beginning, right around that original bike chase, or bike fight, whatever you want to call it. And then it's at the end too. It's almost like a breathing. It's like a really like raspy breathing sound, which I think is really cool. I like the way they use that. But yeah, it's not really a whole lot of music or score to it.
I just always thought that the music with like the weird vocals and the people going ba ba,
yeah, oh yeah,
like I always thought this should have had like a more like techno kind of thing, because it's a cyberpunk movie. I expected kind of more of a techno soundtrack, and it doesn't give you that. Again, I'm not disappointed. I'm just a little surprised that they went that route.
I want to see glow sticks.
Yeah.
I want to hear that bass pumping. Yeah, no, I get what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. Like, maybe they thought it had already been played out, because you know what kind of music I think would have fit perfectly like this? Like, do you remember the music they used in The Warriors? You watch The Warriors again, because you'll recognize the music right off.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it a few times. I just don't remember the music.
I'm surprised, because that's one of the more memorable things I think about it. Well, anyway, that has a great sort of like future kind of vibe. It's like you'll notice it next time you watch the movie.
We need like Prodigy Firestarter just on a loop, right?
Oh man, yeah.
The good old days.
But yeah, like I would give everything like this movie 10 out of 10. I would probably give the music maybe a 7 out of 10 or something.
Yeah, I get that.
I feel like the music doesn't quite match up to everything else, but it's fine. It's not like a detriment to the movie or anything like that. But everything else I just feel so strongly about. I love the characters, I love the story, the art, the look, the light, the color. It's so great. So many great sci-fi tropes being used so well. Just the definition of their powers and the scope of them and how they use them and stuff. And there's different ways too. Like they do it a little bit more. It doesn't get played up enough. It's more in the manga, but they get a little bit about how like K has a connection to them because they can use, like, the whole point is like they can't just use anybody. They don't really get that across in the movie. Like they didn't just randomly grab K. Like K, there's something special in her that makes her useful to be used as a conduit. But yeah, she has like a really good fight in the manga with Tetsuo, like on like an aircraft carrier, which is really badass. But yeah, like this movie squeezed in what it could, but there's some really excellent things that couldn't be in the movie. One that I really like is there's this whole part extended part where Kay and Kaneda and a couple of other members of her resistance group are being like hunted in the city by like the authorities, and they're like fighting it, and they're being chased by like these cool like techno tanks and stuff throughout these neighborhoods and stuff. That's really cool stuff. But I mean, like I said, you can't just cram everything. I think they did about as good a job as you can do. I love it. It's one of my favorite adaptations of anything ever. So, but I'm just saying, if people are a fan of this, they should totally check out the manga. I first read the manga the second time it was released in North America. This time not in color, just in the original black and white. And that was Dark Horse did it. Back in the late 90s or early 2000s, Dark Horse released it. And I read that basically by a combination of just standing in the store reading it. And there were about 2 issues, and there were 2 volumes of it that were at my library that I took out and read. And that's how I read it that way. This is the newer one from Kodansha Comics. It's not really much different. Obviously, the art and everything. It's a newer translation. And also it involves the first couple pages of each volume is in color, like 2 or 3 pages are in color, and that's different from the Dark Horse. But supposedly this is the more definitive translation than the Dark Horse. I really can't remember. It's been years since I read it. But I don't even think the Dark Horse is still in print. But if you wanted to get it, you'd probably have to go online. But if you're looking just to buy Akira in the stores, this is the one that's out these days. This came out in around, 2007 or something. And I just bought each volume as they came out. Super stoked to have it. That Art of Akira book has been out forever, and I keep meaning to buy it, and I keep putting it off because it's a lot of money. But I'm such a huge Akira fan, I'll eventually buy it all. But yeah, so this is apparently a slightly different translation than the Dark Horse version. And I don't know if the Dark Horse version was collected in quite the same way. This is 6 fairly large volumes. I can't remember exactly if it's the same amount of volumes in the Dark Horse or not. I'll have to look that up sometime. But yeah, that's where I read it.
Yeah, those colored pages look really good.
Yeah, they did a really good job. It wasn't just like some splash job. So, but as far as I know, that was never collected though. Which is weird. Like as far as I know, you can only buy that by buying individual issues, and I don't know if they finished. So that's something to look into too. But yeah, I remember seeing at least 2 or 3 issues of that year, right around back when I was first getting into comics, 2003, 2004, and I did not buy them. And I'm just like, fuck, why didn't I buy them?
Because now they're like out of print and probably go for a ton of money, right?
Yeah. And honestly, even if I didn't love Akira the way I do, and obviously I do, I'm obsessed with Epic. Like I want to like collect almost all the Epic stuff I can find because I just really have a thing for Epic.
You know, Dark Horse too put out a lot of really interesting things. Like in the, I remember in the early '90s.
Yeah, they were the ones that really licensed everything, right? They got all the great licensing details. They were like Star Wars,
Yeah.
RoboCop, Alien, Predator, Alien versus Predator.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where Alien versus Predator came from, people. Not that lame movie.
I've got most of those. I think that's good stuff.
It's funny. I follow various comics. Not as many as you think, because I try to keep it limited. But I follow various comic creators and stuff on Twitter, right? And I remember somebody, not somebody I subscribed to, but somebody I subscribed to who followed somebody else, retweeted somebody, I can't remember who it was, some artist, I can't remember. And he put up a tweet that was just like last week that said like that how he just recently bought the comic adaptation. Well, not comic, I only was comic, with the comic which was the shit, what is it? The Terminator, the Terminator RoboCop crossover. And he's just like, I just bought him, and I'm really happy to have him. He's like, he said, but I'm actually hesitant to read it again because I don't want to ruin my memory of it being the greatest story ever told.
Yeah, it's so crazy that they even made a video game out of that.
It was a good video game. It was better than any of the crappy RoboCop games.
They were,
shit.
Yeah.
I remember playing the RoboCop video game. They made it so true to the movie that you would just clunk and walk along, and you'd get shot 50 times before you could shoot them back.
It's always some stupid like a bat or something flies through, and it's just a very,
I know,
very very typical side scrolling.
I wonder how aware people are, like younger people are, of like what like the standard side scroller games are like. Like I realize younger people that maybe you're aware of like the classics. The best ones. You don't understand probably the era of like say 1992, 93 or whatever where that was just every game.
Right.
It didn't matter what it was. It was a side scroller where they usually had to they didn't have enough plot. So they had to keep throwing weird stuff in and making stuff up. And like you said, like why would there be a bat? Why is RoboCop fighting bats? It's like, well, I don't know. We knew he was flying in. So we had bats flying down like it was fucking Castlevania. And we just accepted it.
So many games like that where there would be some flying projectile and then like maybe something on the ground and something that's not in the film.
Here, like jump on this one to get to this one to get the power up on the top one. It's like logistically this makes no sense. Why on earth would the character do this? Or why would they be in such an environment? I have I own one of the they made quite a few Spider-Man games, but I own a Spider-Man game from about 94 for the Super Nintendo. It might have just been called Spider-Man. And there's this great level where the level is actually J. Jonah Jameson's penthouse. And of course, it doesn't make any sense because it's all like levels and you have to jump and stuff. Like, why? How is this his house? How can he live in such a place? He hates Spider-Man. Why would he live in a place with like platforms and high things? Like, the only person that could traverse this house is Spider-Man. Because you need to like web sling and jump and stick to walls and stuff. It's like, well, because that's how level design worked back then. And of course, in Spider-Man, you had all the great powers of a punch, a kick, sticking to a wall, and shooting one web at an enemy. That was all you could do.
You couldn't shoot a web at a
I have the current Spider-Man Spider-Man game for PS4, and it is really excellent. I really like it. I think I'm actually going to do a video finally on my channel soon to talk about Spider-Man in general, which sounds like it'll be 2.5 hours long, but I'll try to, because there's just a few things I want to touch on, including that game. It's just going to be a general Spider-Man thing because there's some things I want to say. So, and my thoughts on the game will be in there too. Excellent game, really great game, really great game. I have a few minor quibbles, but no big deal. Really excellent game. Certainly looking forward to the sequel.
That's one I need to pick up. It's always been one of my favorites.
Oh, it's a ton of fun. Ton of fun. And, it's kind of like the same thing as the Batman Arkham games. It's like, finally, after all these years of, became limited technologies of, like, this is what the experience would be like, it's like playing the comic book, kind of, You finally have access to the real powers. You do stuff the way the character would actually do it, all really great stuff. And it's a really good depiction of Doc Ock. It's a really good arc. Like, that's kind of the main. I don't think I'm spoiling anything by saying like he's kind of like the main villain in this.
You said that was before he was Doc Ock, right?
That's how it starts, but I don't think it's a huge spoiler to say that before it's over he becomes Doc Ock.
I mean, you would expect him to. I mean, that's like the coolest, Spider-Man enemy.
Yeah, and finally, unlike every other video game that had him, when you get a fight with Doc Ock, it feels like fighting Doc Ock. Like he's got the arms coming at you from all directions. He's climbing up on things. He's picking things up and throwing them at you. Like, I remember fighting Doc Ock. He's the boss at the end of the very first stage in that Spider-Man game I own. And, it's a 2D thing. Basically, you can't punch or kick him at all because you can't get past the arms. What you do is you're in a weird lab, and when you turn on this laser that randomly comes on and off, and basically you lure him into the path of the laser, and that's how you beat him, by getting him fried by the laser several times. Which, I mean, I guess is something. I mean, the Super Nintendo, it's limited. You do what you have to do. But now, full freedom, 3D, run around, swing on things, throw things, shoot webs, use gadgets, use cool punch and kick combos. It's all available to you. It's so great. Yeah, the game does a bit of a fake out. They make it seem like Mr. Negative is going to be the main bad guy, and then it, gets peeled back that it's more Doc Ock. I mean, I'm sorry for people I'm spoiling that for, but once you're once you played that game for about an hour, you already kind of figured it out. So, sorry about that, people. If you were.
So this is not like the current like Spider-Man Homecoming Spider-Man. This is totally different.
Totally different. It's its own continuity. Which is nice.
That's good, yeah.
Yeah, and like I said, one of the things that makes me happiest about it is, unlike the movie's continuity, for instance, it's like, guess what? You're not some high school kid. You're Spider-Man, and you've been on the job for 8 years, and that is so nice. And so, of course, that does play with the timeline versus the comics, but that's fine. It's its own thing, because obviously in the comics, Spider-Man did fight Doc Ock when he was in his teens. Well, in this timeline, he fought Doc Ock later. Okay. I have no problem with that. No problem at all. As I said, my main problem is how they seem so embarrassed by MJ.
Yeah, I know. I was going to mention that, but...
they turn MJ into an intrepid reporter that keeps putting herself in harm's way to get the story, which she's never, ever, ever, ever been in anything except for other media, because they're just like, we can't have her be a model party girl. That's embarrassing. That makes women look bad, or I don't know what they're thinking, but yeah. And they even toned down her hotness. Now she's just sort of meh. And I know how people can have a field day with that, and people will be like, what kind of bro are you? You're pissed off. Like, MJ in the game isn't hot. I'm like, no, that's not what I mean. I just mean it's part of her character, dude.
I guess it's hard.
It's supposed to be the big contrast between the two. Is that Peter is a shy, introverted geek, but he winds up with the extroverted, hot party.
Right.
And the idea is like the fact that they're so different is one of the things that plays off each other. It's not like objectifying MJ and turning into a sex object and being like, yes, that's his prize. Like, I mean, come on, people.
Yeah.
Apparently, the people that made the game were like, that's a minefield. I don't want to step in.
Yeah.
We're going to tone down her hotness. She'll be okay looking, and she'll be a reporter. They basically turn her into Lois Lane. Say Lois Lane.
See, that's stupid. That right there is stupid.
Yeah. And there's a few times in the game where you have to play as her, which isn't as horrible as it sounds, but again, it's unnecessary. So there's a few times where you have to sneak around as MJ, right? Like, she's in a dangerous situation. There's guys, and you have to sneak around. And they're not bad. They're not as bad as they sound. Because sometimes when you play games where you have to play as like a character that can't fight and it really sucks, it's not so bad. They don't do a bad job of it. You just have to sneak around a few things, make sure you don't get seen. Because you get caught, game over.
Mm-hmm. I'm guessing maybe there's been a lot of backlash with games the past few years with certain decisions, whether it be racially or whatever. Maybe that's why they went that direction with Mary Jane, because
I'm sure.
Because in Homecoming she's
Homecoming, she's
I
not
guess
she's not the model party girl in that either. In Homecoming,
yeah.
they're making her just like him. Like I said, it seems a mistake. Oh look, she's like a geeky kind of type too and stuff. Hell, they couldn't even have Flash be a dumb jock. They made Flash into like an Indian guy, and they're like, okay, if he's going to be Indian, it's not going to be like who's racist now? Because they're like, if he's Indian, it's not going to be believable that he's a jock. We'll put him on that like trivia team or whatever it is. Like, I think that was a really stupid move. I don't care if they're going to make Flash a different race. I will totally admit it doesn't matter if Flash is a different race, but you're changing his character by making him like some sort of like, geek guy.
Right.
Flash is supposed to be a football player jock. So yeah.
It's. I mean, you know what I'm talking about. Like, I know some of the Far Cry games have gotten some backlash because of they may have whitewashed some things, but it's I don't know.
It's funny. Games and comics and everything now walks a tightrope between two different backlashes. It watches the backlash between the people that want like the more PC stuff and the backlash of the totally bigoted people that freak out anytime anything has changed. Because that's like the whole Gamergate and Comicgate thing. Like, I hate even talking about Comicsgate. I don't want to believe it's a real thing. These are the extreme crazy people who think that like diversity is ruining comics and stuff. Like, get up, like fuck off.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that it may be some problems. Some people may be misrepresented, but I really think that people are going way overboard with things. It's like Far Cry 3. The whole problem was he was an American guy, but the whole thing takes place in Tibet. He's of Tibetan heritage, but grew up in America. He comes back, has to go do shit, and they're like, well, he sounds too much like a white dude, but he's American. He has an American, he doesn't have an accent.
Yeah, if he grew up in the U.S.
Yeah, exactly. It's really kind of an odd thing to complain about, but
yeah,
I mean,
like I said, they all have to walk a tightrope between the two extremes now. People get pissed off about that, or the people that are just like, why isn't everything white and why isn't everything super sexist and awesome like it used to be?
You have a certain group that
people think the world is being ruined, right? Like, oh no, there's like a black character in Star Wars.
Exactly.
Like, there are people like that, which is really fucking sad.
Well, they're like, oh, and they added the Asian girl just because she's Asian and they want to represent as many races as possible. Fuck, I thought it was cool. I liked her character. I mean,
I feel horrible about that. Like, because because not only were they mad, they didn't just because they even directed their anger directly at the actress.
Right.
Which is awful. Oh, she shouldn't have taken the job, I guess.
Didn't she? She had to like delete her account or something.
She left Twitter and everything.
That's terrible. I was
following Mark Hamill, and he was flipping out about it, and I agree with him. Like, what a terrible thing for these awful, stupid people to do.
Well, I mean, whatever the case may be, I mean, she's still a human being. I mean, I don't know.
Again, she's an actor doing a job, If you thought her acting was terrible, even that is not grounds to, like, attack her on Twitter, but it wasn't that her acting was terrible. It was that they didn't like the character. Well, fuck, she didn't write the character. She played the character. And again, they cast you. Are you going to say, I don't know. I feel like you're only casting me because you're trying to make some sort of political statement about race. I mean, Star Wars should be the most diverse thing in the world.
Exactly. I think the more diverse, the better. I mean, because that's realistic.
Yeah. It's a world full of, like, people from multiple planets with aliens and everything like that. And yet you think all the humans should just be white and talk one way or something? Like, oh, that's crazy. I don't want to get into a fall in the Star Wars trap again.
Well, it's like, can you imagine the backlash on Star Trek? When Captain Kirk kissed Uhura?
Yeah.
Like, can you imagine? I mean, like, during that, was that like the 60s? Can you imagine that?
That was the first interracial kiss on American TV.
So I can imagine, like, people, like, breaking their televisions.
And only the second interracial kiss on TV, period.
Wow.
A few years before that, on British television, there was an interracial kiss. It was weird, too. It wasn't even a show. It was like a TV broadcast of like a play, and in the play, I think a white man kisses a black woman, and that was the first time that ever happened on TV, period. And then a few years later, but I'm pretty sure it was a bigger audience that saw the Kirk thing. But yeah, and again, Gene Roddenberry was absolutely right. You know, he's like, yeah, of course there's a black woman. It's like we're at war with the Russians. Yeah, but there would be a Russian. The whole point is, it's a future, you idiot.
There's a
giving you a
fucking
future.
on there.
Yeah, I'm giving you a future where there's a federation and countries aren't at war with each other. Yeah, because I'm sure there are people like, oh, there's a friggin' commie on there. Like that was the point. That was like, and like that. Yeah, that was the point. When they cast Sulu, they wanted an Asian guy. Is that wrong? Like he's trying to reflect a future that he believed in.
I think that's I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think that represents the melting pot. You know that the world is going to become. You know.
Yeah. I know. I can't believe people are so upset about it.
You've got both sides of the spectrum. You know, you've got people that are like legitimately racist.
Yeah.
And then you've got the other side that's like, people aren't being represented enough. You know, we need to make every white superhero, a different race.
Yeah, it's those two extremes that pull at like all the comics and the shows and everything like that, and it's really sad.
We need to find some sort of balance in between, but I guess it's that way with a lot of things.
I hadn't even thought about the comic. Hopefully, that Comic Gate stuff has died down. I haven't looked into it for the last few weeks. I don't think about it. Like the people flipping out about Mark Waid and stuff like that. Not even going to talk about it. It makes me pissed off.
You really see the really venomous side of certain geek cultures.
Yeah, exactly. Because honestly, it's true. I mean, I'm 35. I grew up honestly believing in like geek culture being like a friendly place full of open-minded people, and and to have the internet pull back that veil and show me that actually that's true, but it's also saturated with like all the normal assholes from the real world are in there too. Like that makes me so sad. Like that's their trigger, Like that upsets me so much to find that out. That's why I don't want to be associated with any fandom, right? Like I'm a fan of this, I'm a fan of that, but don't attach me to the fandom. Leave me out of it. I am who I am. I like what I like, but don't attach me to the other people because I don't have their beliefs and political agenda.
Right.
And all that. I don't want to drag that into this. I just want to like the stuff I like.
But it's like with the Ghostbusters remake, like they were using that the either racist or sexist, misogynistic, as a way to power that extremely mediocre movie. They didn't have faith the movie was going to do well, so they used this, social way of not only getting free press, but generating an audience that wouldn't have seen this movie otherwise.
I know they almost guilted some people into seeing it because they're like, "Well, I'm not sexist. I better go see the movie."
Well, it's like you couldn't review the thing if you didn't give it a positive review. You were a sexist. I mean, if you were a man or a white man, you were racist and sexist.
I mean, as much as I like Ghostbusters, I mean, I'm kind of shocked by like how little I cared about any of that. Like, I didn't like the movie very much, but the movie didn't piss me off or make me mad.
I just thought it was a bad movie. I mean, it's like legitimately like. A comedian shouldn't have made that movie. I mean, a comedian like that, like, the guy that does a lot of, they do a lot of ad libbing. That's just the kind of director he is.
Paul Feig.
Yeah. So, I mean, like,
I like the guy. He's an okay guy.
Sure.
I like the stuff he's done, sure. But yeah. But if he's turning around and saying, like, you don't like my movie because you're sexist, like, shut up.
I just felt like he was the wrong man for the job. And, I don't really have any faith that this new Ghostbusters film is going to be any good either because Reitman's attached. I really don't care, honestly. Like, but I was one of the people that got my comment deleted off the Ghostbusters trailer when it first came out. I forgot what I even said. It's been so long ago.
Yeah, I knew that happened, right? They deleted a ton of comments and stuff.
And it wasn't like, white power, whatever. It was just,
You're just like, the movie doesn't look very good.
It was something very innocent. It didn't have any, bad language or anything in it. And but it's,
But now the other backlash is now that they've announced this new movie, people that like really liked that movie or were part of the movie are mad because they're just like, what are you doing? Trying to like make it seem like our movie didn't happen? Like that happens all the fucking time. Get used to Hollywood.
Oh, your movie was not successful.
What's that? A remake or a sequel is going to ignore a past sequel? I've never heard of that before. Like, come
they're
on, man.
still trying to get traction off of that, you know?
It happens all the goddamn time.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's just because it's a big thing. It is. And if people want to, like, isn't it okay to pretend a movie doesn't exist if that's your personal preference? Should people?
Isn't that what we're?
I pretend there are no sequels to The Crow. Okay.
Right.
Are people going to get offended about that? Oh man, show some respect for Iggy Pop. No.
But isn't that what you're supposed to do? Isn't that what they tell you to do? Is they quit being a nerd in your mom's basement, you know, like deal with it. It's going to be a new movie. Okay.
Yeah.
You know, I just won't watch it.
I guess that's the thing that shocks me this so much. Like, maybe I shouldn't be shocked, but does shock me about that kind of stuff happening these days is because I put myself right near the top of people that care way too much about this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I did. Now I found out there's a whole other level. Makes me feel a little better about myself.
Yeah.
You know, like people. This makes me too mad, but I'll just say, you know, like fucking Bill Maher after he said that horrible thing about Stan Lee, and then I guess he just told the people, oh, just to grow up about it or something like that. I'm just like, fuck you, man. Like, nothing wrong with my life or any of these people that dedicate their lives to these things. At least we like things, aren't bitter, arrogant pricks like you are.
Who the fuck is he to tell someone else to grow up, you know?
Exactly. Go back to screwing 19-year-olds. That's really grown up. Like, I mean, I always saw that side of him, but because he often made, like, you know, points that I thought were well made and arguments that I mostly agree with him, I gave him a pass. I feel kind of stupid for, like, you know, it's not like that. This opened my eyes to him completely, but I guess because I always thought, yeah, he's an arrogant prick, but like he wasn't like he's an arrogant prick. Oh, I fucking hate his guts. Now, yes, I'll admit it. I fucking hate his guts now. It's not just for having that opinion. It's for choosing that timing.
Right.
Telling, you know, the world is mourning the loss of Stan Lee, and he's telling everybody, you shouldn't care because what he did was pointless and childish. Like, what kind of tact is that? Nobody asked you. So, I mean, he's entitled to his opinion. Like, I don't give a fuck. But to, like, come down on us in a time of mourning and celebration of somebody's life and accomplishments and to belittle them in that way, like, what the fuck is wrong with him? Some people are like, oh, he's just trolling. I'm like, even if he is just trolling, that's a horrible thing to do.
Right.
I hope when he dies, a whole bunch of people tell everybody that liked him to not give a shit. I guess that's what I do. I guess when he dies, I should, like, find, like, his fan club and tell them they should all, like, grow up and move on with their lives because he accomplished nothing.
Fuck, you were watching the back catalog of Politically Incorrect.
Yeah, exactly. Grow up. Anyway, that's all I'll say about that. But I am a little, disappointed in myself for giving him a pass all these years. I guess I just didn't know he was capable of being that fucking petty.
Yeah.
The more you know.
I mean, you know, comedians seem to pride themselves on not caring about how soon it is after a tragedy. Not even a tragedy. You know, the guy died. I mean, it is too soon. I don't care who you are. It's too soon to be. And it wasn't even a joke. I mean, that's a legit, like, that's a dig.
He was so annoyed. He was personally so annoyed that there was such an outpouring of grief and respect for this man that he felt he had to, like, step in and tell us all that we're wrong. I mean, what the fuck?
Yeah,
Stan Lee will be remembered as, like, one of the great pop culture figures of the 20th century. What will you be remembered of, you bitter little fuck? Anyway, that's all I'll say. I could go on, obviously, in my hatred, but yeah, I'm rarely triggered, but I'll admit that doesn't.
Well, you've built up a thick skin of being constantly disappointed by, adaptations of things you enjoy.
But Akira is a very great adaptation, and you could say that one of the main successes, of course, is like, well, the guy that wrote it and drew it was the same guy that wrote and directed it, so that probably really helps. But it's true that doesn't always help. I can't think of an example, but I know there's been a few times where a writer or whoever has directed his own movie version, and it didn't really seem to help any at all. But I guess you could say Stephen King directing Maximum Overdrive. But at the same time, Maximum Overdrive was not exactly a great piece of literature either, so moot point there. But anyway, yeah, I just really respect how they threw everything they had into this. I mean, the manga was still ongoing at the time. This isn't like years later when Akira had built up this great reputation. Obviously, it was a very popular manga in the 80s. It was a big deal. It was, but still, it didn't have the benefit of hindsight of people saying, "Oh, look how influential." Like this, the manga, it was still ongoing when they made this movie, which was a great. And he was a little. I remember reading. He was a little skeptical. He was like, "I don't know if it is a good idea." But something convinced him. I'm not sure what.
Well, he had to change his story to fit the film. So yeah. But at least, you know, the original writer did that. So
yeah, at least he got to change it himself. He didn't have to watch somebody else say, "Okay, out with this, out with this, out with this," which is still to this day very much the norm. And I have to accept sometimes it's just necessary. You know, I've come a long way. You know, 10 years ago, like I was always just like, "Fuck every adaptation. Why don't they just film it?" I realize you can't just drop the graphic novel on the table and tell them to film it. I realize that. It took me a while to learn it. But at the same time, it still doesn't mean I'm giving everything a pass. You know, there's still a right way and a wrong way to do it. Right. And this is definitely the right way. But yeah, he didn't have any intention to adapt it outside. But I guess it says here he just was very intrigued. Luckily, like I said, very luckily, they managed to get a really huge budget for it, which is helps. You know, if you're going to do something of this, you're going to get to do it right and do it justice. And my God,
which is why it turned out as good as it did.
Yeah, as you said, the quality is there in every frame, just every frame, and just has gone on to be just a tremendously impactful movie, not just for the stuff we said about what it did for animation or the anime boom, but the genre of cyberpunk, which is one of my favorite. It's like my favorite subgenre of cyberpunk. You know, some of my favorite things are Akira, Blade Runner, the novel Neuromancer, which is like one of the first true like cyberpunk novels that came out in 1984. That's an amazing book, which I'm baffled that hasn't been a movie yet. Like, where the fuck is the movie about that? That movie that's been a book since 1984, and there's never been a movie about it. But there's certainly been stuff that picks up stuff from like Neuromancer. That it's kind of a low level one. It's one that flies under the radar. They like to talk about because it's more of a 5 minutes into the future type movie than necessarily cyberpunk. But that's what the hell's it called? Strange Days. Strange Days, I think, takes a lot of cues from something like Neuromancer. But yeah, I love all that. And the early 80s was like where all this sort of fermented, which was great too. You had Metal Hurlant, the French magazine, heavy metal, you know, all this stuff. And I've babbled many times about how the confluence of all these elements and artists coming together and to make the movie that never happened, Jodorowsky's version of Dune, and how even though that didn't happen, it brought all these great artists into the industry and had this crazy ripple effect throughout the movies for the next like 2-3 decades. Mobius and all this stuff, Geiger, you know, all these people that had never worked in movies before, these artists and writers and stuff being brought into it, and then just tremendous. Love it. And really, yeah, I'd say like, so that's like the mid 70s, but again, the movie didn't happen. But by the time you get into like the early 80s, yeah, all this stuff is really starting to show up. And it's beautiful.
I'm trying to think of good cyberpunk movies. I got a lot of bad ones I'm looking at. I know we did Hardware on the show before. That's
a pretty good one.
Yeah, it's decent.
I might as well announce, as I said, he's going to be that Richard Stanley. We talked about how it's sad he doesn't like get to do feature-length movies anymore. Apparently, he's going to get to do one. It's going to be an adaptation of a H.P. Lovecraft novel. Or not, well, novel, he didn't do novels. A novel, The Color Out of Space. And supposedly it's going to star Nick Cage, which I'm sure most people are like, oh, Nick Cage and stuff. And I can take it or leave it. I don't know if Jay and I have talked about this on the show, but neither of us was impressed by the recent Nick Cage outing. What's it called? Mandy. Like, and I know, it seems like the type of movie to be right down our alley. It was certainly a movie going in I wanted to like, and there were things I appreciated about it, but at the end of the day, I felt the same way you do. I felt it kind of had a cheap look. I felt like the story was pretty thin. I also felt like the pacing was done wrong. Like, things were done out of order. He took out the worst threats first, and things got easier as he went. I even felt that the know, everybody who's well acquainted with Nick Cage, particularly his work of say the last 15 years, is well acquainted with his amazing talent of being over the top and insane. I would even go so far as saying it didn't even matter that he was in this movie. If somebody else had done it, and it would have been the same. I mean, yes, you have one great delivery of line where he goes, "My shirt," and his voice totally cracks. Sure, I'll give it up to Nick Cage for that one line. But apart from that, I'm sure some other guy could have screamed on the toilet.
Yeah, man, it's like I never do this, but I told you I watched the film and I didn't like it.
Yeah.
And everyone's still gushing on Twitter about how great it is. So I'm like, oh fuck, well I guess I'll watch it again. Maybe I missed something.
I watched it again too.
And I think I liked it even less the second time. It's I mean, there's maybe 5 or 10 minutes that are cool visually, but other than that, I was not that impressed at all. I'm surprised, but it's.
Here are my favorite cyberpunk films that I made a compilation of. It's not too many, but you got Blade Runner and Akira in there. Dark City, I love Dark City. That's one I endlessly champion. We already mentioned Ghost in the Shell, which is just like Akira was a great manga and was adapted into a very good movie. Probably not as powerful as Akira, but still a good movie. City of Lost Children kind of counts. It's kind of more fantasy, but I still put it in there. 12 Monkeys. I like 12 Monkeys a lot.
Oh, yeah.
And The Matrix kind of counts. The Matrix is not exactly my favorite kind of cyberpunk, but it fits. So those are kind of my favorite ones. And, of course, the Blade Runner 2049 as well. Love that.
Check out that the film Upgrade. Came out last year.
Yeah, I remember there were 4 people that were putting that on their list of favorite movies of the year, and I barely know about it.
It was not a very good year, but yeah, it was one of my favorite films of the year.
Yeah, I will.
But, speaking of that, I would like if you would check out the new Suspiria at some point. Well, I'd like to hear what you think about it.
I just don't have any platform to see it, unless I'm going to buy it, I guess. Like I said, I fully expected to see that in theaters. I was enraged when that didn't show up in my theater. And I realized, it's because the Oxford's gone, because that's where it would have played. So, yeah, I was going to see that. I was all set to see that like in September. So I can get to see it. So, yeah, I'm super interested in seeing Suspiria, but I'm not sure exactly when I'm going to get an opportunity.
I was on board because I like the cast. I like a lot of those, actresses.
Did you buy it?
And what I did was I watched half of it on like a torrent site.
Yeah.
And I realized that they weren't translating the German, I believe it is.
Okay.
And I was like, wait, they're speaking an awful lot of German, and I'm not getting any subtitles here. So anyway, then I really enjoyed it, even though I didn't know what they were saying. Most of it's in English. But and then I bought the 4K transfer for like $15. So it really wasn't that bad. I haven't bought a movie in so long, so.
Yeah. No, I just bought 2 pretty expensive movies. I'm going to show them to you. Just to ask you.
But yeah, I'd highly recommend Suspiria to you guys. If you haven't, if you haven't seen it yet, if you have seen it, post down below what you think about it, because I was really blown away because I wasn't really that anxious to see it.
There is a Canadian record store that was out west but was never here called Sunrise Records, and there's only one though. There were several HMVs. This only replaced one of them. The others just turned into other things. But anyway, I never really got much chance to go there. But one of the cool things about the Sunrise Records is finally, unlike all the other record stores I went to when I looked at movies, they actually made its own section of movies that are like stuff like Scream Factory and Arrow and stuff. They made it much better. So finally, after 15 years or whatever of refusing to buy the thing, I refused to buy the thing. I was like, a better version's coming. A better version's coming. I'm not buying that because a better version will come. I finally got Boom, the Shout Factory Steelbook with 3 discs, and it's absolutely amazing. I was so happy. I was so thrilled to find out that on disc 3, the supplemental ones, they have the TV edit of it. I watched that, and I enjoyed it. I mean, it's obviously everything that pisses me off about TV edits.
Right.
I kind of like owning it, right? Like, it cuts out like 15 minutes. It pulls back on some of the violence and gore. Obviously, it bleeps out or just cuts out the some of the swearing and stuff. And it's not even in widescreen, so it's in the thing with the bars and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
But I like it because it has that 80s quality. because like it's not restored at all. It looks the way it looked on TV, so it's scratchy and stuff. I liked it. The thing I thought was most interesting how they added narration to it, and not just it's not much narration. Like at the very beginning where it like says Winter 1982, he reads that out loud for you, and then it's not really narration, but every time a new character comes on the screen, he gives a little character intro. He says like Bennett, former Bush pilot, blah 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 blah. Like every character gets an intro, and they change the ending and they make it suck because how the ending is the cool standoff between the two. It's like, well, let's see what happened. It fades out. They cut to a dog running. It's like, oh look, it got away as a dog. Like fuck that. But anyway, so super pleased to get that. And even though it cost a lot, because I think this is actually pretty good. This is $29.99, so that's $30, which getting it for less than 30 is pretty amazing. And this was I think $24.99. Speaking of what is it? The Warriors. The same filmmaker, Walter Hill. Here is Streets of Fire. And a nice
cool
multi-disc steelbook, which is I think a super underrated movie. Like it doesn't quite hit the mark of what it was supposed to be. It was supposed to be like this really great thing. They were going to make a trilogy. It never happened. But it is still a really cool and interesting movie. A lot of cool stuff in it. I really like the look. Roger Hill is, or Walter Hill. Walter Hill. There aren't directors like him anymore. Walter Hill, he made manly movies. His movies were all about testosterone. His movies were all about that kind of stuff, and this movie's no exception. Had the very underrated. He never became a star, Michael Paré, but I like him in the lead role with a very young, only 18-year-old Diane Lane. And for people that like Rick Moranis is in this in a really funny little role. And of course, I can't believe that so many people haven't seen this movie if you like somebody like Willem Dafoe, because Willem Dafoe basically plays like some sort of like evil David Bowie character, and it's amazing. And like it breaks my heart that most people have not seen Willem Dafoe do that, because it's crazy. So really happy to get this. Says what, a 2K scan, and then the other disc 2 has two feature-length documentaries. I watched one of them. I watched Rumble on the Lot, Walter Hill's Streets of Fire Revisited. There's also one called Shotgun and Six Strings, the making of a rock and roll fable. But yeah, this movie it was a very ambitious movie, and it didn't quite hit the way he wanted to, and it didn't become a big hit or anything like that, but at least it's a cult movie, and I really like the movie. So when I didn't even know this existed, but I was just like, I'm just gonna buy the thing. I was like, no, I have to buy this too. I spent like $60, but I don't mind.
Wow. Yeah, I know. Those things are very pricey. That's why I don't pick up a lot of stuff anymore.
Well, these were actually, within the context of Canada, at least, these were pretty decent prices. I'm used to seeing this stuff be $35 and more. Right. They had several arrows there. All the arrows were like 45 and up. There's no getting any of those arrows. So even though it was a lot of money, at least I feel like it's good quality. And also, I was just like, I'll kick myself if these disappear and I don't have a chance to get them later. I'm super thrilled to have these. Really cool. Yeah, Streets of Fire is a movie that I actually rented years ago.
Oh, really?
Not really, no. I just knew it was Walter Hill. I knew that because I was a big fan of the Warriors. And I was like, what else he do? And I rented it. I was like, that was different. No. Yeah, Walter Hill is one of my more favorite sort of underrated guys. We talked about it on the Sausage Factory. We did an episode on underrated directors, and he was my pick. It was
oh, really?
I like Walter Hill.
Wow. Which is underrated to some people, yeah.
Is some of his like biggest movies are the ones I don't like, or at least most successful movies are movies I don't like care about. Like I don't care about 48 Hours. Like I think it's fine, but I'm not really a fan. And yet that's usually I think what a lot of people think of when they think of like Walter Hill. But I like his comic booky stuff, and like Streets of Fire and The Warriors are both that. But yeah, you should watch The Warriors. I only own an old DVD of The Warriors, but you should watch that again just to listen to the music, and you'll know what I mean. Like that kind of music I think would have fit a lot better in Akira. Not that this music was bad. But anyway, I guess we can circle back and some final thoughts on Akira. This is something that I love. It's one of my absolute favorites. So there's always more things I could say or could have said that maybe it'll hit me later. I'm like, why didn't I talk about that? But that'll do for now. Yeah, just to reiterate some things. Definitely a game changer. just for me personally, but also for for anime in the West and cyberpunk and all this stuff. All those terms again, a landmark, just a super important movie that has just had a big impact, a ripple effect that still could be seen to this day. Super thankful for it, of course, for helping initiate the anime boom, because anime is a big part of my life. And certainly there's anime that's not good too, but the good stuff. I know like anything that gets popular, you get an oversaturation of the market.
Right.
Same thing with like manga and stuff. Like today I was at a bookstore and I was looking at the manga and I was like, I don't recognize any of this. Like I haven't kept up in a while, and there's just dozens and dozens of all these titles. And I'm like, I don't know. Like if you look at the covers, every single one of them looks good because, it has that great, but it doesn't mean it's actually a good manga, right? And stuff. So I'm kind of actually at loose ends right now, looking for sort of the next really big, good one. Now that we've done this, I probably will reread all 6 volumes of this again. It's funny, little aside, sorry, don't want to take up time, but it always makes me laugh, is not in a manga, but a really great comic that I like is Scott Pilgrim. And there's a great moment in Scott Pilgrim where when he's first starting to get to know Ramona, and she's visiting him at his apartment, and they're sitting on the bed together, and they don't have it with them. I guess he's probably doesn't own it because he doesn't own much stuff, but he's relating the story of Akira to her. And she's like, and then what happened? And he's like, and then it was like 12 pages of tidal waves and explosions. And that's very true, because that's really what you get, particularly in the second volume. The second volume, I'm pretty sure the end of it is basically where Tetsuo has his first like cataclysm. And it literally is. You're just like flipping page after page, and it's like buildings underwater and waves. It's like there's a ton of it. So people use the term scenery porn. That's kind of a different kind of scenery porn, I guess. Not the lush stuff from Studio Ghibli, but kind of a destruction scenery porn that I like so much. So yeah, as that point, I mean, that's a good example to show like just how much Akira has permeated pop culture.
Mm-hmm.
You talk to people that aren't into that kind of stuff. If there is an anime they might have heard of, it's probably Akira. It's still kind of the big one, even all these years later. It's still the big one, which is great. And as I said, I am open to a live movie adaptation, but they'd have to meet a lot of conditions. But maybe it's better if it never happens. I don't know. As late as 2017. That New Zealand director, the guy that did Thor Ragnarok,
mm-hmm.
he's expressed interest in doing it, and he said he would totally use Asian actors and teenagers and everything. So who knows?
Yeah, it's definitely possible now with CGI is there.
But the main thing I just need to get across, I'm sure I'll get this anyways, like, again, I love 2D animation, and often anime does the best job of it. I can't stand people that feel like if they're, say, an animated version of something, that it's not legitimate, like, until you get a live action movie. That legitimizes it. Like, oh, now it's serious. Now it's good. Like, sometimes they'll have something like that, and there'll be comments and like, imagine a live action movie of this or that. I'm like, I don't need to, because it doesn't matter to me. Like, if it happens, fine. But that doesn't legitimize it to me, Like, if somebody was like, oh, live action Macross, I'd be like, okay, fine. But that doesn't suddenly take it to a new level. That doesn't make it suddenly real. Like, I'm fine with Macross as it is. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know. But I know there's a lot of people that see things that way. It's like, well, you could tell them everything about Akira, and it sounds really cool to them. But, it's animated, so they're not into it. So still, even though we should be well out of the animation age ghetto, we're still not exactly. There's still echoes of it. And certain people are closed-minded, which is too bad. Because, I mean, if there's anything we try to talk about on this show, it's like, try to be open-minded about any sort of genre, any sort of medium, and stuff like that. Because that's what we try to do on the show. We try to talk about movies of all sorts, all kinds, whether they're black and white or old or foreign or animated or whatever. That's what we're really trying to do, is try to celebrate movies of all different kinds and stuff. That's why we felt compelled to do the show, because we wanted sort of a way to express that. We didn't really get to do that in other platforms and stuff. So anyway, that's, I guess, the message we'll leave you with there. So I think we'll save our little announcement for next time when we're a little more organized on it. But we have a little bit of an event coming up, hopefully. Maybe we'll talk about that next week, what it's going to be.
Cool.
All right. So thanks very much for watching. That's Akira. And yeah, that's going to do it. And hopefully we won't have any problems. We'll be able to come at you next week with something, and then we can move forward with some more ambitious stuff. maybe a
Cool.
series. But again, as I've said, not a big series, a smaller series. We'll let you know. Blah blah blah.
All right, thanks, guys.
Thanks a lot. We'll see you again. Peace.